I would often watch reviews go on for like 15 minutes about one single point a game, and then sometimes else would whip out this drawing tool, and you're like, oh shit, here we go again.
As soon as the drawing tool comes out,
these drawing tools,
that's like taking the belt off. I know exactly. Right, this is going to be a new episode of Summoning Insight. Episode whatever, season whatever, doesn't matter. It's not like Stranger Things. You don't really need to know exactly where we're at, do you? All you need to know is we're not dead yet, and we haven't made it. And League of Legends is still going on. So obviously this show is sponsored by Esports Bet. Now, as you'll know, in all big games, they run the Esports Bet World's Prediction Series contest, which is a 10 million USDT prize pool. So it's in League of Legends, like all the major regions, LEC, LCK. By the way, forget major regions, even PCS, VCS, all that jazz, CB LOL, all on there. If you want to bet on other games like IEM Cologne in CSGO, by the way, on the YouTube channel for CSGO, there's now a competitive edge for the planes for that if you wanted to bet on that. But anyway, if you're back in League of Legends, join this competition for free. Just go to the website, sign up, they'll give you some DJT, you can start betting. Basically think of it like a prediction leaderboard, and if you get up to a certain point, you can win prize money, which is hundreds of thousands of USDT. Also, as well as the free competition, because obviously it's free, just like the country of America on this day. Although, is it really? It's free by the most technical standards. In this case, it actually is free. America, it's actually not that free a country anymore. Sadly, that's actually why that sort of become a bit marketing. But whatever, the premise was there in the initial days. Also, you can obviously bet any crypto you have otherwise. And if you do indeed deposit your crypto, you will also, tangentially to the World's Prediction Series contest, get a 50x deposit bonus in DJT as a bonus, as I say. So you can also use those to bet on this particular competition anyway. We'll talk about that later in the episode.
Yeah, use our referral link below on Twitch. You can get it in the Twitch chat as well. You can get it in the YouTube. Also, by the way, guys, just other announcements. Please subscribe to our YouTube and Twitch channels. That really helps us. Or follow the Twitch channel. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow the Spotify channels as an announcement. This show is on Spotify. If you're following the old show and are like, why isn't it updating? It's because we have a new channel on Spotify. So just use your little fingers and type Summoning Insight. Or there's a link in the YouTube video as well. And that's because we have video now on Spotify. So if you prefer to watch on Spotify, totally cool. Why don't you go do that? And Best Damn League Show and Monty and Wolf Show also on Spotify on video now. So you watch it whatever way you want. You're fucking welcome.
And if you don't watch it, there's Insight Express, where they catch up on the highlights or interesting topics from all the shows that we do on this League of Legends channel.
That's right. We have a new editor, a Danian, who's been helping us with that. So we are going to be able to, if we have topics, like Excel was obviously a big topic across multiple of our shows last week. So that'll be a shorter form series. So now you guys get Summoning Insight, Best Damn League Show, Monty and Wolf Show, Clips, Insight Express, Competitive Edge, League of Legends. You guys get it all. It's all there for your enjoyment every week. We're pumping it out. More CSGO content on our CSGO channel as well. So really exciting stuff for you guys with Insight on Esports. Hopefully you'll be enjoying it for the rest of the summer season and into Worlds. Also, if you guys missed it, we're going to start talking about LCK here. But we did have an interview of over an hour with Arnold, the CEO of Gen.G, on the Monty and Wolf show this week. If you're curious about how he tempted Chovy to join Gen.G, assembled that roster, his thoughts on what you can do, what he wants to have done to build LCK in the future. It's all very interesting, so go ahead and check out that.
Must have been a tricky negotiation, because he's like, I don't understand. Why does it have to be in the contract that one of the other traditional laning positions cannot have a world-class player? And he's like, listen, I'm Chovy. That's just what I do, baby. Like, you know, it wouldn't be a great storyline if the team actually won any of these games. No, anyway, before we get into that, though, I actually have some more low-key waffle / scene-related stuff I thought we would briefly touch on, right?
Sure.
Because this is an angle where our experience on camera and doing shoulder content, actually, I think we can provide some interesting insight to people for what to them would just be generic shoulder content. So I saw today, maybe it was yesterday, I don't know, that LEC released the latest of those pop quiz features they do, Monty.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's the short one where they have different ones. Like they've done ones in the past, like name the players who won Worlds or whatever.
That one was fun. I enjoyed that one.
Some hilarious ones in that. Like El Yoyo thought that like top esports won at an event. Like I think like he That was the one before he was in Mad, but even so, it was like, really? Okay. And so there was some really wild ones. But anyway, they did one today that was one, in my opinion, one of the hardest of those, which is about where you have to guess the ability, right? There's a few things to this, Monty, I thought we would say, because fans are just, and then they're just going to think, did he get it right or wrong? First of all, those features, by the way, are about, I'm not exaggerating, if you've never done one, they are about 10 times harder than you think sat at home. Because what you're not getting is, you're sat at home. You don't even have a time limit. You could pause the video and think about it. You could not have any answer. Then when he says it, go, oh yeah, it could have been Lucian Q, even though you didn't think Lucian Q. First of all, they have to, on the spot, give an answer. And secondly, if you know anything about how on-camera works, where you have the feeling that I'm on camera now, and I have pressure because people want an answer, and I've got a limited amount of time, I can't just wait 20 seconds per time. That means, by the way, you forget tons of things you know in your brain. It's even why people will just say, they'll have a brain fart, they'll just say like TSM when they mean Cloud9, and then some fun will be like, lol, it was CI9. It's like, look at the context of what he said, he probably meant C9. So the point is, first of all, don't judge talent, because I saw it was the casters doing it. Don't judge him too harshly. Like, guaranteed Cadril knows all those bloody abilities, obviously, doesn't he? And then secondly, I actually think low-key, as I mentioned, dude, I think the ability one is the hardest of all of them that they do. Because, mate, remember, what makes League of Legends patch notes like being on the bloody edge of like reading some fucking astrophysics paper is every ability doesn't just do one thing, does it? It does like 4 different stats things of like, right, it does on-hit CC, but then it gives a small shield scaling by the distance that you are away, which then if you land the second CC, it does as crit, but then that activates procs that, fuck you, like, no one remembers any of that, even if you play, put it this way, I played Pike all the time, I bet I couldn't name what all the abilities do. I could say like one throws a hook or something, for all it does this though, like, doesn't it? Like, no one knows those, so I already think that's really hard. So even though I saw like Cadril, for example, was really bad, he got nearly all of them wrong, he got so many wrong, even on Champions League players, but like, I don't blame him. I think those features are really hard. I think people don't underestimate, because it's a classic problem with Analyst Desk, isn't it? They always think if you slip up once, like, he's an idiot. It's like, you know how hard that is to do. It's not, just getting your words out without slipping up's a skill.
Yeah, and also, at least in terms of abilities, I mean, some of the abilities just have the world's stupidest names that, you, as a caster, you basically, like, you can never, ever say Lilia's watch out Eep on a broadcast. Like, you just have to use the letters that are associated with them. And oftentimes, especially,
that's why Quickshot had that unique element, didn't he? That was his branding. If people remember, in the early days, he wanted to be the guy who didn't say like Lee Sin Z. He wanted to say whatever the fuck that ability is.
Right. And like a lot of times too, you know, there is kind of a general way that they design League of Legends champions and decide which ability to put on which button, because like E is generally like the longer cooldown movement ability, Q is like usually the lower cooldown, more like spammable signature ability. So there is actually a logic in the way that they do things, so that most champions follow kind of a specific pattern. Not always, obviously, because champions do different things, but it's a lot easier to remember that way, generally speaking, than it is to remember all of the individual ability names. Plus, I mean, very few people know all the individual ability names if your name isn't Quickshot. So
I mean, the joke is, like I said, even people who mained these champions in pro play don't always know the name and every single aspect of what the ability does. Because remember, this is why I've always pointed out, even Faker isn't really calculating those plays where he gets away with 2 health. Nobody can do that. You just play by feel, and if you're lucky and you're a genius like Faker or in CSGO Simple or something, yes, your feel is like essentially like cheats where you just know where the guy is. But you're still going off feel too. You don't really calculate all that. The other thing I wanted to say was this though, Monty. Here's what's crazy. It took them until a couple of years ago to figure out this content was just there on the table to be taken in League of Legends, Monty. You know, the LCS still doesn't even do this content. This is why esports is so underwhelming, right? You have to understand, guys, the reason why I don't get a big head about being really good at esports is, who the fuck am I competing against? I'm on some like one-eyed man is the king in the kingdom of the blind level shit here. Because one thing I always thought was hilarious is, you know in CSGO, that's where this content first came from, Monty, and it was actually from betting companies, if you remember. They would get teams that they were partnered with, and they would do this sort of content like overrated, underrated, and they'd ask the players. Here's what I never understood. ESL and Blast were just sat back going, yeah, let's just let them, a rival, though, an independent company that has nothing to do with our event, keep doing that content with the players in our event. Let's not, you know, on Media Day. Why don't we just do that video ourselves? Like, I'll go one further, mate. If I was in like G2, I would just do that video myself anyway. Like, I get that you might do it for your sponsors. I would just do that. I would just go and ask Yankos and Caps, overrated, underrated, perks, or whatever. It's free content. So that's one area I actually props to LEC for doing those and having a nice variety of them and getting different people mixed in, because I think that area, it's so simple to do. I know you have to logistically get people in a room, that's true. But once you get them there, first of all, if you don't know, spoiler, they also don't just film one of these. They film like 4 of them in a day or something. You just do them in a row.
Oh, yeah,
and then,
of course.
So it's totally easy logistically once you get them there. And secondly, it's just fun content. Who doesn't like those? They're great to put in the background.
Yeah, I've enjoyed all of those. Like, it's been funny to and it's also, it serves two purposes, which I think is really smart. Like, first off, it engages your viewers because it's fun, like you're saying, but it also reminds them in a very clever way about what champions are in the meta right now and what they do. So like, maybe you're a more casual player or you haven't caught up in a while and you watch this content, you're like, oh, I remember what this ability does, or I remember the history of Worlds, for example. Or,
yes.
It's a refresher course that maybe you didn't watch all those Worlds, but now you have a better sense of who won, who was doing well at the time. So it really just it engages the fan base in a fun way, but it also educates your fan base about how the state of the game right now and the history of the game, which is just fucking great. Another thing.
By the way, though, the other one thing that did make me laugh though is, even though I gave that whole disclaimer, like, don't be too harsh when Cadril fucked up, and by the way, he totally cursed himself by saying at the beginning, like, as long as I don't come last, they came last. Spoiler. So anyway, the one that I did laugh at though, because since it's so tricky to guess all the abilities, they were doing the one where you just look at the ability, like what the box looks like, the art on the fucking queue. You don't know what their letter is, right? And the only one I did laugh at was when Trouble Link didn't get the one for Orient Sol. He's in the actual picture of the ability. That was the only one, because it was like, listen,
maybe it was like really small on a monitor.
Yeah, listen, for the other ones, don't worry, you can get all the names wrong a million times. Like when it's like Starlight, whatever, there's about 1 million champions that could be, but that theme's not even unique, is it? But yeah, that one was funny. Although I will say, this actually shows, by the way, that she definitely has. I should really ask her. I want to know where in the UK she was living for a while, because she does have that really weird like London twang to her voice, where she dude, the joke is, even though she's Greek, she could probably do that thing that everyone thinks British people do, where they go like bottle of water, or it's not like teasing it or whatever. She could do that. That's like her accent. That's like, she is how she talks. Fair play.
Speaking of it's just a funny sidebar, but like funny esports stories. If you guys haven't seen, there's an old video now from WCG that the Dota community loves, called Doa Casts Dota. Where he was basically forced to cast Dota at WCG because you have to cast a bunch of games, and he didn't know anything about Dota. And on top of that, while the stream was in English, he was casting off of like a Chinese client in China. So speaking of the Aurelion Sol one, there's a really funny moment there's like a clip compilation of this where Doa, and it's Valdez as well, who casts LCK now. So it's him and Valdez casting together. And it was from like 10 years ago. And so there's a really funny moment where they're in draft and they pick Windrunner, and the voice line says, "Windrunner at your service." And Doa's like, I think it's like Ranger, so it just makes him seem really stupid.
Yes.
But you have to know that he couldn't actually hear the English language.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly. Yes.
So he got mega trolled by having to cast.
Make it funny though. I agree. Make it funny.
So the Dota community absolutely fucking loved him because it was so funny. He and Valdez really crushed it. But yeah, that's a funny like clip segment if you guys want to go watch that at some point in time. The other thing I wanted to bring up about LEC was like I really enjoyed the card game segment that they did this week.
That was very well executed. Skate.
Yeah, apparently Dracos wrote it, and like just the production value to go through, write that skit, create all those cards.
Look great, by the way. They look like magic cards.
They look so good. And like what they did was like include all of the Caps narratives of like the 2018 Caps and the Fnatic G2. There's the layers of jokes in there were just amazing.
And that.
Yeah, and
even thought, by the way, this is the one area normally I would never expect a Riot broadcast to actually do this. They even poked fun. Remember, this is the LEC, of the notion that Fnatic winning Season 1 Worlds is both bullshit. They actually poked fun at that on the broadcast. That's legit, by the way. Whoever getting that joke through actually almost gives me like a tiny bit of hope for like European League of Legends that I can get that. Because if that was like the American equivalent, Monty, they would never touch that with a fucking million, with a barge pole, mate. You would never even touch that. It would be the sacred cow, wouldn't it? Like they banter themselves that it's not a real championship.
Well, I like how it was only quick shot too, where it's like the card is like so scuffed and like bent. And Meg's just like, no.
Because the joke is they were making it like it's a Black Lotus or something that you obviously wouldn't be allowed to like use in play now or something. Yeah, exactly. I know.
But he's like, no, that's bullshit. So yeah, I think Medic and Quickshot did a great job of that. Apparently Dracos wrote it. I just really respect that because it was so fast paced that even recording that probably took like a million takes because there's so much information in the script that they're going through. So that was like really, really high effort, guys. It was really funny. And again, it's another piece that you get to talk about, Caps' crowd buff now in the current narrative, but you also get to talk about the history of Caps in this matchup. And it wasn't in a bullshit way.
It even had real info, that real things that would help you potentially watch matches and know the history of the game. Yeah, it wasn't just fluff.
Yeah,
it was good.
Yeah, I thought it was really, really fun to watch, and like you could appreciate it if you knew very little about it, and if you watched the entire history, like I think you really appreciate it because there were so many different layers to the jokes.
Yeah.
So yeah, fucking good content.
Thing is, though, I will say, I hope you understand that content idea has fucking legs. You could do loads of those. Like, I would do one where it's like, oh, but it's going to be the year of the duck. Like, nope, sorry, the Officio is actually a GM now. I'm going to have to move that into the graveyard. You could do so many angles, couldn't you? It'd be great. Brilliant, yeah. By the way, it's a random aside, just because people will enjoy it on this show. This was years and years ago, to be fair, when he'd only just gotten big and he started the co-stream and stuff. I remember asking LS early on, like, you are, like, invested all this money, though. You've got, like, a whole business strategy, and it's not just, like, you're not just spending it or making it, right? And he did tell me, but he goes, well, I've got that Black Lotus and stuff. And I was like, no, don't even say that to me. Like, like he said that as though he had like gold bullion in a bank. So I'm like, what if tomorrow just worth nothing? And like, but whatever. You have to know less to know why he would think that. So I've got some assets, inflationary assets.
What's also funny is like, so like,
I love it. I just love it.
Papa Smithy like co-invested in like the Black Lotus from LS.
This is some nerd shit. They think they're like a Wall Street or something.
He was like, he like bought this like really. I mean, it has gone up in value a lot, so it actually turned out to be a very.
Is it like 40k or 100k or something ridiculous?
It's more than that, I think. It's yeah.
I get the sort of bucket list angle that, like, if you were a nerd like I was in the 90s, mate, the idea you could ever even own that's like impossible. You'd never, obviously. Yeah. So like, I get the idea that to them it is like having a Lambo, but it's still ridiculous to buy.
But it is funny that LS was like selling equity shares in his Black Lotus. Papa Smithy's like, sign me up.
I love it.
It is. Just super fun.
That's what happens when you give nerds money. We never should have given y'all money. Exactly.
We're gonna pool our money and buy the rarest magic card and hermetically seal it in a plastic block. It's too fucking funny, man. I started playing this. There's a new card game. So basically, I was really into Legend of the Five Rings, and it got killed by Fantasy Flight, the company that made it, which made me very sad. So Uber, the Overwatch caster, and Doe and I have started playing this game called Flesh and Blood. And it's so funny because like what I loved about L5R was you just bought, like when the cards came out, you just got all the cards, like you paid $20 and just got all the cards. So it wasn't random, right? And now I'm playing Flesh and Blood, which is random. And it's just so funny because like I actually just don't care about card rarity. I just want to play the game. And so Uber and Doe are like these giant nerds about card rarity and like foils and like, this really rare card. And they want to just like encase it in kryptonite or carbonite, excuse me, immediately. And I'm just like, oh, is that valuable? And so it's been fun. A lot of people.
By the way, the one thing I didn't say, though, this is the part that I think is mad. This is where people don't go far enough in esports. I'm not joking, Monty. If I was LEC, I would do a deal with the teams for a profit share and make an actual card set like that. Dude, I would buy it. That actually looked good. First of all, Magic the Gathering is a fun premise anyway for a game. Everyone can pick it up. It's Hearthstone, basically. And secondly, if it actually was good, like, actually, as you said, it wasn't like they just made the joke like, haha, there's a card that has caps on. The card, I was like, you could tell Dracos has played Magic the Gathering. It was appropriate to how you would structure a champion and then a fucking character or whatever, and then out monster, and then how you would like all the fucking factors and the aura and the buffs. It was really well done. That would actually be a banger piece of merch. That's why my joke was, it's so good. Of course, it's fictional. That's just esports merch in a nutshell, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I think having it be a real game is probably like a development cost you don't want to have go in, but just having it as a collector's item just for fun, like not actually having it be a game, I think is pretty cool. So yeah, I mean, it was a really good idea. I hope they do more of it. Like you said, there's so many jokes you could write into that concept.
Oh, no, we should just do it. It'll have to be in the future, but we'll just get like a Summoning Insight game on that made with all the stupid things that we have, But like morning, Forgiven joins your game. Now you must suck a dick or win. Like, like the next, if you do not win in the next 4 turns, you must. Whatever. Well, the year of we could go with.
The Year of the Duck is honestly like super funny.
That's a good one.
Like if you had Nuke Duck, you could cancel him out with any of the other Year of the Ducks, but like 2022 Year of the Duck is actually like the trump card. Be really, really funny.
There you go. There you go.
Really, really funny. All right, shall we talk about some matches before we bring Zven on? LCK, obviously the hot topic here, and we didn't get to talk a lot about matches on the Monty and Wolf show because it was dominated by the Gen.G.
Let me set it up like this then, because here's the premise of how I want to ask you about LCK, Monty. If anyone's seen the Competitive Edge episodes we've done, where they featured bets around LCK matches, the main theme has been this. Because they were undefeated last split, every single time T1's the favourite, no matter what. Doesn't matter who they're playing, doesn't matter how T1's playing, doesn't matter how the opponent's playing, doesn't matter what style the opponent's playing, what the meta is. So, spoiler, right? We've been constantly crafting these matchups where maybe this team can be the one that upsets T1. Maybe they can. Do you actually think T1, like, are they still flawed? Have they ever gotten back? Because it feels like even though they won, I mean, against G2 and made the final, like, they never really ever did fully power up in those. Like, for me, whatever happened in that group stage at MSI sort of broke this team a bit, mate. They've never quite come back together as a unit after that, I don't think.
So it's been a little bit of a roller coaster, I think, with T1, because in week 1 they were doing a bunch of weird strategies and having mixed success, kind of looking questionable even in their wins. Then they bounce back week 2, and I think they look stronger. And then this week, obviously, I think it was a bit of a trap game against Guangdong Freaks because, look, they were coming into this week. They probably were doing a lot of their preparations for DRX later in the week because that was a much more threatening opponent. Guangdong isn't very good, but they did play well in this series. But honestly, I think a lot of it was we saw how good Seraphine is in the LCK. And after these games, the rise of Seraphine across the rest of the week was like pretty rapid. So sometimes this can happen where, for example, a scrim meta can develop and certain teams will know about the Seraphine and other teams may not because they haven't scrimmed against these opponents. So like what happens in scrims, guys, just so you're aware, is one team will bring out a champion, right? And then they'll scrim against a team and then they may just dominate that team. And the next day, the team that got dominated will then take that champion against a different opponent. So there's kind of this like cycle of scrims where when a meta starts to form, certain teams will know about it, but it may take a week for all of the teams to know about it. And so if T1
you also get fucked over if you notice, because you notice in your description there, I'll extend it further. Imagine Team A uses the Seraphine, and it was their concept, Monty, so they're amazing. So because they smashed Team B uses it against Team C and thinks, I sort of know what was going on here, and Team B wins. So then Team C just goes, Seraphine is OP. So then Team C, are you ready, plays Team D, but just loses. So Team B goes, it's overrated, Seraphine. You can deal with it. And then you let Team A pick it against it. That's what really happens. That's how scrim metas actually can even fuck you, even when you're in the bubble because you're on the wrong half of the bubble or whatever,
maybe like the team you play against, they suck at Seraphine, right? And so you just get this really bad read. And you're not playing it yourself. Even if you have a good Seraphine player, maybe that player is like, it's not so good. But anyway, this is to say, many people, I think, knew that Seraphine was on the up and up. Just from anecdotal experience or looking at high solo queue, right? And it comes out. And I think that what we should credit Guangdong with was some really fucking good drafts, honestly. And they came in, and this is how trap games occur. Maybe T1 didn't take them seriously. Also, Guangdong, they were sniping T1. They played weird shit, and they played it pretty well. And
Which is even the Freaks' old MO, if people remember. They always used to have the bullshit, because they used to literally have I Love Who back in the day. They used to literally do the sniper draft every time against these fucks and just upset them. Except this time it's Kane, if people don't know, the old Team Liquid coach.
Yeah. So, yeah, Kwangdong comes in, and basically what they've got is they've got a few different iterations of a draft that is effectively great scaling, really high engage, and high crowd control, that is going to be extremely effective for them. A lot of sustain as well, so that they want to fight these really elongated team fights. And they lose the first game rolling with the Ornn in the mid lane, which was one of the obviously very high engage picks that they have. And that leads into the second draft where Ornn gets banned, right? And so they thought it was enough of a threat, but then this is where the Seraphine comes in. And the Seraphine is in both of the next two games and provides a lot of extremely high value. But Kwangdong, in their second draft, is running with Imperial Mandate Swain, as well as Senna, and like a fasting Senna, with Seraphine building like Leandri's Magi's and Seraph's Embrace.
So there's a comp you've never played against ever.
Yeah, right. And they have a Viego too for resets, but it's like the amount of engage is crazy. The amount of heals coming in onto the Swain is also crazy. So ridiculous. Swain just becomes unkillable.
He's unkillable. Yeah, of course.
And especially because T1, yes, they've got Azir and Gwen, but the Callista really isn't working out for them. And so this leads into adaptation. So they say, okay, the Senna is really the problem. Like if we take away the Senna, then the Seraphine can't farm. We're also going to ban the Swain so that this can't work. Okay, well, they just go right back to mid Ornn, and then they play fasting Ashe. And the Ashe obviously provides more kiting, more engage. So now you have Wukong engage, you have Ornn engage in the third game, you have Seraphine engage, you have Ashe engage, you have Gnar engage, and it's an unkillable front line, effectively. Like, how do you kill with Lissandra, Lee Sin? Yes, they've got a GP, and yes, they've got a Jinx, but T1's thinking, okay, if we just swap out the Callista, once we get a pick, okay, then the Jinx is going to get excited. But how do you get a pick? You can't kill their front line, and if you get into their back line, well, Hoyt he builds a Quicksilver Sash, so you can't Lissandra ult him. So like basically you could never kill Hoyt by the end of this game on the Seraphine. You're never going to get into the back line. You can't kill their front line, and they just grind you down over time with all of this crowd control and front to back team fighting. And I think Kwangdong realized that if we just play high engage, and the thing about this is it's non-committal engage too. It's like, who cares if we miss an Ornn ult? Who cares if we miss an Ashe ult? Who cares if we miss a Seraphine ult? We just pull back, and that's it. We're not committed to bad fights. So you have so many tools in order to engage. And
very creative mid lane drafting as well to offset Faker. Yeah, it's very interesting the way they do that.
Swain obviously, T1's a team that, that has used Swain as well.
These Ornn mid picks though are very impressive though. I didn't expect that to come out.
Yeah, and the Ornn was rough into Azir, right? But it's not so rough if you're playing into a Lissandra. And you really just see the scaling power of this composition too. So I think these comps were like very targeted against T1 because T1 has been a little bit predictable. When they started LCK this year playing a lot of, they wanted to play fasting Senna with like Yasuo, or they wanted to play Callista with they have been trying to play early game, and they've been wanting to also play a lot of Lee Sin, and Owner's been really good on Lee Sin. But then Kwangdong is just like, okay, let's just play super conservatively, mega tanks, hard outscale, sustain tanks in Swain's case. And yeah, that's what we'll just wait, and we'll force them to do something. And if they play some of these early game champions like Callista or Lee Sin, we're just going to have an insane advantage by the end. So yeah, and also like T1 really likes to play Tahm Kench right now. And they're going to do that. You just know they're going to do it. Because Korea is probably the best Tahm Kench player in the world. So it's a really hard punish, I think. Very
Gumayusi.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think obviously like T1 didn't come into this expecting Seraphine and mid Ornn. That's very clear. But Kwangdong, I think, played a strong series and knew their win conditions. They itemized correctly. Like I loved the QSS coming in on Hoyt. So they were smart, and they got incredibly bodied. later that same week by Gen.G, which we'll talk about as well, because Gen.G looks really good.
I've got 2 quick points on this though. One, if you're a Teddy admirer, and I love me some Teddy, what a glorious series to just beat your whole team and show that, you know what, pretty good fucking player, pretty reliable ADC, right? And then secondly, this series actually does have a spiritual connection to the later series against was it DRX? Is that who I'm thinking of? Was it DRX? Yes, they played DRX the same week. Because I saw someone made a joke, but it's a fucking banger joke. Obviously, I can't remember your name, random person on Reddit. But it was a great line. Because it is relevant to this series, Monty. In the series against DRX, obviously they took Callista for deft. And someone said that basically DRX did T1 a favour by denying Gumayusi the Callista. Whoever did that joke, that is well played. Because I agree. That's the thing. This is the problem I have with Gumayusi, Monty, is the more time goes on, the more cracks appear, not the opposite. It's not like there was an initial flaw because you're young and a rookie and you're going to develop it. It's all okay. Like, for example, if you tell me this guy's amazing mechanics, he's like a hard carry ADC, can't play Callista, of course. Like, what? Well, can he play then? Like, the problem is, mate, he has certain champions he is amazing on. The rest, though, he's just an okay player at LCK. He's not, for me, he's not like a true star player yet. Depends, because it's very much depending on how the team plays and what champion he gets onto. He's not a guy you can just know every game's going to carry.
Yeah, and I think there's 2 historical points here that I want to touch on about T1, and one is, like, considering you are the esports historian, their match win streak in LCK stopped at 24. So it's definitely one of the most impressive win streaks in esports history.
Yeah, exactly. That's mecca.
So how would you, if we have to like put a bow on this win streak now that it's over, what would you say about it? What are your thoughts?
It's definitely not number one, because realistically, number one is probably the original T1 at the end of 2013 in the winter season where they just won every single game, because that included 3 playoff series, guys. Like, the 9-0 part of that was just like winning 3 best of 5s. And you know what? They also played like really good opponents. They played like KT Bullets, etc. and MVP. They were playing the other best teams in the region. So I think the old T1 has to be number one. Number 2 is actually a mega underrated one people don't even remember, which is between online and offline play, and including IPL 5, World Elite once had like a 30-match winning streak, which included some BO1s, some BO3, but they had another one that was epic. That was pretty epic back in the day. This one's right up there, though. Like, remember, because the key thing is, I also think actually the G2 one's fairly underrated. Bear in mind, some of it was against playoff competition and then even some international squads. But I think this is right up there. A lot of streaks in League usually aren't that great. Like, this one, because it's one of the best regions, that already makes it pretty good because you don't have to have the international play element. And then also, I would just say, like, the main problem is, like, it does sort of kill the storyline, though, that it's freaks that end it. Like, if it ended in the final, you know, and you were like in some match, great, but like, you know, like the Kongdu freaks are the ones that ended it. That's the only part that sort of dampens it down. I still think it's pretty good. The downside is it's got more asterisks than most of these streaks because it's got the whole thing COVID. And yeah, exactly. That does a little bit mess with it. I'd also say, to be fair, I don't think Korea's at its strongest at the moment. It's kind of in a mixed spot. In fact, maybe that's the conversation we should briefly have here. What do you actually think currently about like the level of Korea? Because on the one hand, like, it's definitely not as bad as a few years ago where you thought like none of these teams should win Worlds at all. But I actually think last Worlds gave people a bit of false hope. You remember last Worlds where once you got to the semis, it was like 3 Korean teams and then EDG and everyone was like, ooh, LCK is back. It isn't, it isn't. Like, it's definitely not like far and away the strongest region. Where are they at the moment, do you think?
So I would say that watching week 1 of LCK, we expected the teams to be better, especially because Damwon was getting Noguri back, and like it looked like a good meta for Ruler and Chovy, which it has been. So I would say like there was an expectation that Korea could at least field 3 pretty good teams, and then we'll see about the rest. DRX obviously had a strong start, did get upset by Live Sandbox earlier this week, but DRX, it's a good meta for DRX, I think, and they had a pretty weak strength of schedule, so it's going to be, you know, they lost both of their matches this week. They should have won the first game against T1, but they did get stomped in the second game. So I think there are bright spots. The thing about week 1 that was that it was so slow and it was so boring that if you compared it to LPL, which was on the same patch, and you saw the kind of pace of play, that I was worried that Korea was really just going to fall behind and not play aggressively and just basically handshake into late game scenarios and do the very risk averse thing that Korea's been doing for a number of years now, which just doesn't work in an era of incomplete information. The biggest change that I think affected Korea was that they tend to play, the coaches like to play a more conservative style. And when you have total information because of vision, that worked really well. But now that vision is much more limited, you can't just buy and place infinite numbers of wards on the map. You have to take risks, and you have to take calculated risks, and the LPL teams are like a lot better at doing that. Also, Arnold talked about some stuff, such as like he thinks that data analysis is really far behind in LCK compared to LPL. Like LPL put a lot more resources into their coaching staff and data analysis than LCK teams do for the most part. So I think there's probably that aspect of it also. But now that we're in the third week of play, we've seen, I mean, you would not say that Gen.G is playing unaggressively. Like they're playing really aggressively right now, which is very surprising when we contrast them to Ruler Gen.G last year. Even though, let's be clear, Ruler's the only player who was the holdover on the roster. So it is mostly a new roster, but at the same time, Ruler teams, when everyone but Ruler has changed, have played Ruler style. And I think what's surprising is that it's not, they are being really aggressive about closing, and they want to take risks. But the best thing about this, Thorin, I think, is that their risks are both, they're playing aggressively and they know the plays they can make, and the plays they can make are really amazing. And what's impressive is that they haven't lost a best of 3. They've only lost 1 game, and that was to Damwon. Otherwise, all their series have been 2-0s. If you literally look at Ruler and Chovy right now, they have died 7 times each in 13 games, which is half a death a game.
Yeah.
And like you'd be like, oh, well, they're playing conservatively. Fuck no. Ruler's like on Lucian with a Yumi on him, and Peanut is on Poppy, and they're like diving turrets in bot lane early in the game. Like they're not playing passively. Like they're playing really aggressively for the most part. Peanut's taking all kinds of risks, like his pathing in the jungle in some of these series. Like if you guys haven't seen them, go watch the Kwangdong Freaks game that we saw.
Peanut at his best is when he just goes balls deep. Come on, everyone wants to see that, of course.
He was playing like a fucking psycho in some of these games, like extremely creative pathing, extremely unpredictable. Like in the Kwangdong Freaks game, he's playing Poppy. By the way, he's him and Canyon are like the Poppy players of the league. It's not really being played in a lot of other places right now because I think it's really difficult to play Poppy aggressively well. But he literally will like be on blue side, take red buff, flash over the back of Dragon Pit for speed and to make sure there aren't any level 1 wards, go counter jungle, hex flash over the wall, and then get a gank in at level 2, level 3 into the game. So it's really impressive to see what Peanut is doing right now and the risks he's willing to take and the coordination that he has with his team. But go watch that Kwangdong Freaks game because it's absolutely hilarious because they have an Ashe, right, Kwangdong, and they don't know where Peanut is. So he's doing this wacky pathing, and you see this hawk shot like fly across the map, and they check like the Gen.G side of the jungle, and they don't see Poppy, and they see the camps up. And so all of a sudden, all of these like Kwangdong Freaks question mark pings come on their side of the jungle because they're obviously like, where the fuck is this guy right now? Oh. And then you see the question marks, and then immediately hex flash behind them is a Poppy, and it is one of the funniest fucking things you can watch.
It's like a horror movie, where they do the jump scare with the cat first. So you go, oh, it was just a cat, but then the guy just come out with the axe like this, like that.
But you can literally just see the thought process of the players while this is happening, because like the hawk shot just goes through, and they're like, why are these camps up? And then like the question marks all come up on the map, and then it's like the call was coming from inside the house, and there's Poppy's like fucking behind you, killing you. So definitely worth watching.
Basically, though, bear in mind, we're obviously going to play this upcoming week. Gen.G is the number 1 team for you right now, right?
I mean, yeah, like they play T1 this week. So while you guys are off because LCS and LEC are taking a break this next week, because all of Riot's closed down, except for Riot in Asia, apparently, because I guess LCK and LPL people don't get a break for whatever reason.
Work ethic. It's almost like the game. It's proportionate, isn't it? Yeah. Exactly.
Those leagues are going to keep on going. So this is the perfect time, guys. This is the perfect time to watch these banger matches that are going to be happening. Like coming up this week is obviously T1 versus Gen.G. That's going to shatter, the viewership record probably for this season. By the way, guys, LCK viewership has hit like 650,000 peak so far. So it is crazy right now. LCK is doing really, really well in terms of viewership. But yeah, we get to see that game. There's some other good games that are coming up. Let me pull them up real quick. DRX, I think, has some good games this week as well. DRX Damwon, DRX Gen.G. It's all really good games. Who else does Damwon play? Oh, Damwon's just playing Hanwha. Gen.G is playing DRX and T1. So yeah, some really top tier matches. Also low key, Nongshim versus Live Sandbox might be interesting. KT versus Kwangdong might be interesting. So there are a bunch of good games that you guys can check out while the rest of these leagues are on break. Enjoy the palate cleanser of some world-class League of Legends. With that said, we can talk a little bit. Oh, I wanted to ask you a different question just because for esports historian reasons, because I think it's a fun conversation to have. And I think a lot of people have heard this, but they don't really understand the implications of it, which is that Gumayusi is the younger brother of Innovation, who is one of the probably best StarCraft 2 players of all time. Came along a little bit later into StarCraft 2. But what's so funny when we talk about Gumayusi's style and his personality is that it is so different from Innovation. Innovation was the perfect like macro mechanic player, and he kind of was just like he would just grind you down slowly over time, playing this really conservative style where it was just like constant pressure and just grind until he eventually won the game. As a person, he's extremely reserved, very quiet, shy. And then you have Gumayusi, who is this outlandish, like aggressive player, loves to trash talk and everything like that. So it's very fun to see the really these polar opposite brothers in different games and how it's affected their play styles. But can you give some color on like Innovation's career and why he was such a big name?
Basically, Innovation was one of the sort of almost the vanguard of what were called the Jesper players at the time, where if people don't know, in StarCraft 2 ran simultaneously alongside Brood War for a couple of years, about 2.5 years or so. And what happened was, at the end of that period, during the whole time period, there was a whole back and forth, and in fact, a lawsuit in Korea between Blizzard and like Jesper and all this trash, basically over who decides which games run and should they pay a license fee in Korea to run Brood War, etc. And basically, the way this got resolved at the end, as far as I know, is on some level, I believe actually, like Jesper was winning the case. It was in Korea, and it was sort of like one of those things of like, it's like if China were copyright, it's like, well, fuck you, we're Chinese, so we'll do what we want. But Jesper obviously wants at some point to work with Blizzard because he'd have to, otherwise he's just going to be hanging out with a dead game forever. So they came to a deal, basically, that they would have this 1 year in 2012. It's actually the year where Monty bizarrely had to do that, like OGN, for example, during WCS, where they'd have like a transition year, where in this transition year, teams would start playing StarCraft 2 as well as Brood War, by the way. That's not even a joke. They had a split Pro League at one point in time. And then eventually, after that year, everyone switched to StarCraft 2, which sadly did mean some of the legendary players like B2, etc., just didn't even play Stork. They just played briefly and just quit, basically. But one of the key players was Innovation was actually already like right on the cusp of becoming a really good 1v1 player at the end of Brood War. And so when he transitioned, if you remember, there was that famous article on Team Liquid, The Elephant in the Room, which was about this topic. It was about the idea that everyone was worshipping these StarCraft 2 Korean players, but it's like, bro, those are the fucking jobbers. Like, the real Koreans aren't even playing StarCraft 2 yet. And whoever wrote that article knew his shit because he was right. And people like Innovation, well, as you can imagine, if you're right on the cusp of breaking through 1v1 in one of the hardest games ever, when it's been out for 12 years, yeah, when you come to a newer game that's wide open, you're just going to fucking tear ass. So Innovation, when he came to StarCraft 2, was just dominating for, like, I'd say, like, over the first year or so, year and a half. That's why he came to my team, Team Acer. We bought him from, like, I think it was on, like, maybe Samsung Seoul or some shit like that was whatever the Korean team he was on. I can't remember which team it was. It was like an ex-Jesper team at that point in time. And then basically he had a few years though where he was sort of like just an average player again. And then in the latter years, he actually then came on strong again and then started winning the championships again and going top. Now here's the interesting thing though, even though I agree in terms of personality and like the flair that he plays with, he's very different. They actually have a shared weakness though, in my opinion, which is in line with what I was saying earlier, which is this. One of the big upsides of Innovation's game was obviously also incredible mechanics. He had some really fucking sick, like APM. Everything was smooth. It was all really high level. But I always thought, because I used to talk to a lot of people who were experts of StarCraft 2 at the time, obviously going to events, and they would always tell me the flaw with him as a player was he really did play like he was a robot. As in, he would just do what he thought the best build was. And he was one of those people who thought, essentially, I sort of low-key fuck with this, but he went too far with it. He thought if you execute perfectly, you can win even if they know what you're doing. Now, the problem with that flaw is StarCraft 2 especially is a way more gimmicky game than Brood War. And actually, if the opponent knows exactly what build you're doing and how you're doing it, he can counter you. He can get like edgy. He can do crazy things in the game. So the flaw was, during times where his builds worked and Terran Race was the best, yeah, he would dominate. He would destroy people. He would get like 75% win rate in like pro matches on like multiple race matchups. The problem was, though, essentially, I got the vibe he was way too stubborn in times when it wasn't working. He would just keep doing it again and again. He would think, because this is the flaw, by the way, this is why, by the way, people don't get this. Having talent is a curse. The curse of talent now is you don't get to learn those things. You don't get to improve those things. You're just given them, but you don't know why and you don't know how, and you don't always know the best way to use it. And even worse, it can sort of prop you up so you don't have to learn certain lessons other people did or develop in certain ways. So I would say actually that's the area where I wonder if there's a shared connection though, because the vibe I also get of Gumayusi is a bit like that. It's like he thinks essentially I can sort of do whatever I want, and as long as I do my part right, it works. It's like that's not really the way team games work, especially though, mate. Like so there's the other thing. If you lose the game in your Innovation, I mean, go look in the mirror. Unless you're mad at yourself, it's okay. If you're in a team and you fuck up, you have to look down the line, and especially the faker there, like, come on, man, like that could get a bit dodgy. So I think they have. I would agree they're different people very much, but there might be a shared similarity in the style. Because I wonder if Gumayusi himself doesn't realize, like, mate, the best mechanics in the world aren't needed for this. Like, that's what you do as the cherry on top to level your game up. What you really need is the decision making, adaptability, like have versatility to your game.
Yeah, I think what's going on too is that a lot of the hype last year when Gumayusi came in, right, was around his mechanics, like watching him play champions like Samira so well, and he did get a lot of that hype. And if we look at Zeus, right, Zeus started some games at the beginning of last year and then was basically replaced by Kana, and they more or less developed him behind the scenes, T1, until he obviously Kana left. Zeus got the full-time starting spot at the beginning of 2022. And now, you guys heard Nelson say it on this show last week. Nelson thinks that Zeus is potentially the best player in the world.
Yeah.
And Zeus certainly is having an outstanding year. And you really see the results of that development behind the scenes. And you tend to wonder, like, is Gumayusi's attitude towards the game or towards his own playstyle holding him back in certain ways? Because it's not that he hasn't gotten better, but he hasn't gotten better as fast as a player like Zeus has. And he's, while Zeus is not only in the conversation for best top laners, he's in the conversation for literal best player. And you would not say that Gumayusi isn't even in the conversation for best AD carries.
No.
So,
I even think there's a problem, by the way, that he has, which is this. Dude, I actually think he might also have a hard time because A, he's in LCK, and B, most important, he's on T1. Remember, T1 historically, you'd have to go back to Piglet before they're properly playing hard through the fucking bot lane, for fuck's sake. That's in 2013 and 2014. Like, T1 historically plays with the sort of tertiary AD carry, and they play through the solos historically. So in a team where, again, you have great solos, as you say, this time it's Zeus that's the better one, the top laner, Faker's just good. Like, You're not Uzi I, bro. You can't play like you're Uzi I. They haven't set the team up for you to be Uzi I. I feel like in a fucked up way, he almost should be an LPL team, mate. On an LPL team, they'd know what to do with this guy. What they would do is this: they'd go, right, what you're good at is putting the fucking gas pedal down. So put that motherfucker to the floor, and we'll just do everything else around you, and we'll see if we can win some games. Like, I feel like to play on T1 especially, T1 is way. Just think of even the style they were using this last splitting at Worlds. T1's way about we have like a blueprint how we're going to play, and then everyone has to do their job. It's not about like just go crazy everyone and we're just going to try free flow and stuff like that. So that's the problem with his sort of style. Sometimes you try basically like the way out is through. You just push out and you go right, max it out and sort of limit test and see how good you can get, and then we'll figure out a style. In this case, it'd have to be hyper aggressive. Obviously, I get the vibe. His issue there as well is he has to figure out how to fit with his teammates, not just develop. Like, because he clearly got like he just has fucking a hair trigger, doesn't he? He just goes for everything.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the way that T1 wants to play the game right now, is that they want to play a counter-punching style that is reactive. Yep. Like they're the boxer who, when you throw the jab, they'll let it hit them in order to get the cross in, right? Like they will hit back harder than you hit them, but that requires playing reactively cross map a lot of the time. And it's not about engaging Gumayusi. The thing is like what you do is your players move to get a bigger win somewhere else on the map. And they can do that because they have very mechanically skilled players. It's like if something happens in the bot lane, well, Zeus is going to all in the top side, right? Or Owner's going to head up there and they're going to get more gold, more objectives. But if you have a player who isn't capable of like pulling back at the times when you're making a play somewhere else, then it becomes an issue. And a lot of T1's problems come from, again, Gumayusi being too aggressive and getting picked off. And it's like the way their shot calling system works is not always conducive to his style. Again, it can be like if you're making the counterplay towards Gumayusi, it can work really well, but they don't want to play the game always the same way through one champion. And when you really see that Zeus is more or less the perfect kind of player for this style, and you see Korea and Owner and Faker are, so Gumayusi stands out because he is a bit of a mismatch. And this is, again, why, you really wonder if Teddy was still on this team, how good they could be. Because I think they would be better with Teddy.
Had him now. Yeah. I think they would just complete the team. They'd have no flaw.
Yeah. So,
because there's the other thing to say as well, as someone who's watched lots of styles in different games as well, Monty, the style you're describing, being a counterpuncher, is the hardest to pull off because, as you say, you will have to be able essentially to instantly react, but at the same time be very disciplined. Like essentially, you can't go first. Like if they feint you out and you go for it, then you just get knocked out, don't you? So like it's why people don't know there's like a massive skill to doing that.
Yeah, and you have to be able to take, you have to be able to take the right punch on the chin and knowing that you're going to hit them twice as hard back, right? And
I'll give you the example. You remember a few years back at the classic Season 9 Worlds of G2 where they played that series against T1 and they gave all those dragons up, but they kept like cross-map playing and somehow they won the series. I even said at the time, like, fans will never appreciate how impossible this whole series was. Because it's not like they knew they were going to do that before the game began. They just were reacting instantly, but patiently making the right play and not fucking up and going for the wrong thing. Like, that's so hard to do. That's so hard to do, guys.
I also think that T1's drafts, and honestly, I wonder if basically not having a coach for this length of time is starting to really hurt this team because they seem to not be able to activate their own strengths. Like, I get it. Kallista's strong, guys, when Deft plays it. But this ain't the champ for you, T1. Like, it's not. You don't do well with it. You don't play well with it as a team. You don't get the leads in the early game that you necessarily need. You don't control objectives with it properly. And then you always end up in a late game scenario where it's useless. So for me, bearing in mind that while T1 has coaches, they are not necessarily the same level of strategic. Polt is not the strategic mastermind that other teams' coaches are, period. That's not an expectation we have of Polt. Polt has many other redeeming qualities. But this team is effectively coached by Faker.
Which is wild when you think how many young players they still have, Monty, you know, how inexperienced they are. Like, I could even argue, as fucked up as this sounds, doing so well in spring might have hurt them in that regard. Like, they might have been better if they'd have sort of had taken a knockout punch in the final by Gen.G and then hired a coach or something.
Yeah. So I do wonder, especially the longer the year goes on and the more metas shift, if teams that have more robust coaching staff when it comes to in-game knowledge are going to do better. And I think Gen.G, obviously, I think it was controversial potentially to hire Score, especially considering he had just been in the military for 20 months or however long it is, almost 2 years, when probably wasn't able to pay that much attention to the game, certainly not as a full-time job. Even if he was like grinding out, watching VODs, like it was still a risk. And there's only so much risk when you have a player who had the career longevity that Score did, because clearly he's able to like absorb new metas, and he is pretty much consensus the greatest jungler in League of Legends history. So his sense of macro and timings is probably going to be quite good. He also obviously played alongside Peanut, so he knows some of these players' play styles over a number of years. So it was a bit of a risk to have Score in, and then they have Mafa as well, another former pro player, but they seem to at least really be doing good things right now. And Score is also a player who's had tons of different teammates, had to integrate new teammates, rookies, veterans into the roster, so he knows how to make those kind of changes. The difference that we've seen in Chovy's play in particular has been significant. And I think that was the question with Chovy. Always was,
can to me.
Yeah, like, can Chovy's lane kingdom turn into good teamwork, personal sacrifice, and macro play? And maybe it's just this meta. It's too early to tell. But in this meta, the answer appears to be finally yes. And maybe that's Chovy now that he's older. Maybe it's the coaching staff. Maybe it's the change of the organization. Gen.G tends, again, going back to the Arnold interview we had on the Monty and Wolf show, he said that one thing that attracted Chovy was that they provide a lot of resources for the players, like, exercise regimens, and they tend to provide a lot more structure, I think, than many other Korean teams do.
Have they ever seen where that exercise room is at? They all built like a fucking twig. What the hell are we talking about?
Rulers.
Maybe they're doing cardio. Maybe they're just doing
Rulers apparently lost like
15
kilos or something like that.
Oh, fair enough. Okay.
Yeah. So yes, that's true. Yeah, I think like in general they offer a lot of structure, and maybe that's what Chovy needed. Maybe he needed the discipline to be formed around him, and he bought into that system that Gen.G was offering, and that combined with him getting older, maybe a bit more mature, maybe failing enough times. Maybe he finally realized that if I would like to win a title at some point in my career, perhaps I need to change a few things.
What's sad is, if you could take him back in a time machine, though, mate, he would fucking love the old meta. You just laying into 5v5 team fights. This guy be fucking killing the game. None of this like fucking Roman skirmish, like, because if you don't know, by the way, even though it's the most extreme version ever, the classic moment from Summoning Insight all those years ago in 2014, where Froggen said that joke, but it wasn't a joke about high. Like, he just leaves lane and leaves a whole wave. Like, that is how mid laners think. And spoiler, people like Chovy definitely think that way. So the problem you have is, like, they're not just leaving because it's like solo queue, like, oh, I can help someone. It's like they're just thinking, like, they're doing like the cost benefit equation, and if they don't believe in you as a teammate, they've had bad teamers like Chovy have, spoiler, they're just not making. It's like Kobe, where you just take a shot with two people on him and the other guy open, he's like, yeah, but you'd miss. Like, that's like the fucking vibe he had. So the problem Chovy had, I actually think, and this is an issue, I think, like you say about failing, though, another problem with failing, though, is sometimes I actually get the feeling it can actually make you selfish in a way that's like you're not maliciously selfish. As in, what it means is, because you get so used to being like the only win condition, you start to play like that's the case no matter what team you're on. This actually happened to Simple in CSGO. There was one point where, because he really did have to play twice as well as anyone else for Na'Vi to win the tournament, even then there'd be times where they were like a good enough team, but he'd just like try too many aggressive players, or he'd go for something crazy that like he didn't have to do because he was trying to like force the game to be won for his team. Like, that's the flaw. Chovy, I think, went the other way. In my opinion, his way of being selfish match was just like, right, I can't rely on these guys, so I'm just going to do my part. I'm just going to get my parts. I'm going to get my CS. I'm going to get my kills. Did I get a chance? Nope, didn't. Well, then I just don't get a chance this game. Whereas you see in this squad, it's night and day even to last split. Last split, they were good, but they were a bit ropey. They had to have exactly the right meta. They had to be on the right bloody side of the game. Like, it was way more up and down if they could have won. This one, like you said, this looks like they could win the split. They could win Worlds, let's be real. This team could win Worlds, Gen.G.
I mean, I think you can make a pretty good argument that they're the best team in the world right now.
I would love to see them play an LPL team as well. They'd be a fucking amazing match.
I mean, I'm sure they're scrimming against LPL teams, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, they look really good. And they look good, in, like I said earlier, in all the right ways when it comes to making plays. Like, they're making plays early, they're proactive, they know their limits extremely well, they've got a great versatility when it comes to the champions that they're playing, basically hard to ban out. They have the right pocket picks that you can't really, like, you know, the Poppy is just so fucking annoying the way that Peanut plays it. It's just so annoying. And most other teams do not have the ability to play certain champions in this way, which is what, by the way, going to make this coming match against T1's going to be a banger. Like, the fact that Owner is mechanically so impressive, and he's been playing the Lee Sin. Then you have the jungle matchup is like him versus Peanut, who still is good mechanically, but is really like winning based on like jungle pathing, creativity, working with his teammates super well in the early game. You have the Zeus Doran matchup. Doran's actually been very good recently.
Dude, I just love the way they're doing some like fucking hackneyed, like, they're trying to do like the jungle Archon. You've got like the fucking raw aggression and ganking of Peanut, but with the like veteran pathing and mind of Score. There's always on like that shit in the fucking one. I think it was like Nightmare on Elm Street 3 or whatever, where he reaches into that guy's head and he just goes like, I'm the brains and he pulls his own brains out. That's right. He goes, I'm the brains and you're the brawn. That's like the fucking mad angle Score's pulling out. Fair play.
That's great. I mean, you have to imagine some of this is coming from Score.
Because, dude, I always thought Peanut was like one of the failures of the Korean scene, because this guy, he's another player should have just been born in the fucking LPL, mate. Like, the LPL love a guy like that. In LCK, you would just see his flaws, unfortunately. Like, he was a brilliant player. That's why he's an MVP split. But, like, he would just, for me, he wasn't like a traditional Korean jungler, where Score is the traditional blueprint Korean jungler.
Yeah. So, you know, the matchup this week, like Faker versus Chovy, there's a modern classic, let's say. And then you would think Gen.G probably has a pretty big advantage, because not only are there pocket picks to worry about, everybody's talking about Lehens and Spellbook Singed, and that's been really fun to watch. But also, like, there's been some wackiness with T1's bot lane as well. Now, I do think that the bot lane advantage goes to Gen.G, top lane advantage goes to T1, but the rest of the map, super interesting, right? Should be a really close series. I do think Gen.G will probably win given the current condition of these teams, but it'll be fun. Gen.G still hasn't played two of the other top 4 teams in DRX and T1, and they're playing both of them this week. So we're going to learn a lot about the current form. But
here's
really,
the thing: the match I want to see is this. I want them to go to Worlds, and I want them to go to the playoff bracket. And at some point in the playoff bracket, I want top esports to play against Gen.G, so that I can have Peanut, Chovy, Ruler against Tian, Knight, Jackie Love. That's the
pretty
match
sick.
I want to see. That would be a fucking banger.
I mean, people forget, like, Gen.G overperformed at Worlds last year. Like, BDD, I think, had an unusually good tournament. But they nearly were in the World Finals, guys. Like, they made it to Game 5 of the semis. They were not bad, and even though most of the team's been replaced, I do wonder if this final got into Chovy's head a little bit, because if I'm Chovy and T1's playing worse than expected, and most of them have COVID on stage and are feeling like shit, and you still lose that final. And by the way, they were fucking lucky to even be in that final, because they should have lost Game 5 to Damwon Kia. So you're like, okay, well, we should have lost in the semis. And then, okay, we're here at the final and we lose to like a bunch of dudes sick with COVID. I think you got to take a look at yourself at that point. Like, that's a big wake up call. That's a big wake up call. So yeah, good shit over in the LCK this week. I think, guys, we're going to take a quick break to bring Zven on. But of course, as usual, this part of the show has been sponsored by Esports Bet at esportsbet.io. Earlier today, actually last night, I should say, the odds for that T1 Gen.G game, yesterday were actually in favor of T1. Like Gen.G was the underdog, which I thought was pretty crazy. Now the odds have switched slightly. So Gen.G is now a slight favorite, but I think like late last night they were at like 1.7 or 1.8. So, you know, if you think the match is even, Gen.G got some good odds right now, all I'm going to say, and we'll see how that shifts as the week goes on and people make these predictions. But good time, of course. Go ahead, use our referral link below. If you're going to sign up, get some DJT for free, obviously, just for signing up. Head over to the Discord, message the mods. They'll give you some more. Deposit crypto. You get 50 DJT for every $1 of crypto you deposit. So good times, everybody. We'll be back in just a couple minutes with Zven.
Right, we're back now with our guest, which is going to be Zven. Now, all that needs to be said is this, Zven. When you were literally in a bot lane called the best in the West and you roll swap to the other position in bot lane, a little bit of pressure. You probably have to get pretty good, mate. Some would say you should probably get really good if you're going to do that.
I think it's been a while since people called us the best in the West.
It was a while, true.
It was the good old times, for sure. Yeah, I mean...
listen, of all the things TSM's ruined, that's probably the most egregious.
is that really true?
They did it twice. When you talk about they ruined it. First of all, when you were in the team, and then secondly, they wouldn't let you bloody leave. They were like, Myth, you can leave, but you must stay. Like, the fuck sort of hostage scenario is this? Like, all right, bloody hell, okay. Anyway, luckily, it turns out, Zven, a lot of investigations have been done. Actually, TSM's just cool. There was nothing going on there, mate. Don't worry. Nothing going on. I wouldn't know anything about that.
The lawyers they hired and they gave access to says fine. They said they're very careful to say that nothing illegal has occurred, but they didn't mention anything about whether it was ethical. So convenient how lawyers always are able to do that. They'll you know, there's never any opinion on ethics, only opinions on legality.
Also, who was that investigator? Fucking Cadro or something. There's nothing illegal in this game. Like, okay. The draft good, was it, mate? Okay, fucking hell. I guess they won after 1 minute, didn't they? Right, so.
I like how last time I was here, we were talking shit about TSM, and now I'm here again, and we're still talking shit about TSM.
Time is a flat circle, and this show will always just be about talking shit about TSM. You know, of course, yeah.
The more things change,
I even counted this the other day, though. Dude, because they've started this split badly as well. They've won like 17 out of 25 games this year, guys. Like, this is outrageous.
Wait, what's the record actually?
Yeah, they've won 7 games out of 25 regular split games. Because they were 5-13 in spring, and they're 2-5 now, right?
Yeah, I see it.
That's wild, isn't it? How can that be real life?
That's 1 win less than us this summer split, so maybe I shouldn't talk too much, you know?
Well,
okay.
I mean, some of those losses.
Yeah. You have the excuse, though. You have the asterisk. Yeah, exactly.
You did get handicapped, Zven. Yeah. You came in with having to dig yourself out of a pretty atrocious 0-3 hole, and going 3-1 since then isn't bad. Also, I think you had the bad luck of playing against Flyquest in probably their best game of the split, and legitimately a pretty good game by them. So we'll get into that. I want to start with the start of this split because there has been a lot of issues, I would say, with Cloud9, because the reason you find yourself in this hole is because there were some crazy visa issues going on. So it must have been extremely difficult for you because you're attempting to roll swap. You are not in Korea to practice with your new AD carry and presumably to get good practice in solo queue as a support player, right?
Yeah.
So that's going to make your job a lot fucking harder. Then your AD carry loses his passport and can't get into the country. And you have, by the time you get there, you did go 2-0 in your week, but you have 3 days to practice. So what was this whole scenario? Like, let's start with how did this happen? Like, what was the process of you being convinced or volunteering perhaps to swap roles after, Summit leaves, Fudge's back in top lane. They don't really have a solid support player for Berserker. How did this conversation come about for you?
Wasn't this actually floated as an idea a previous year or something, Sven? I'm sure I heard about this ages before this actual lineup failed. Wasn't this already an idea a year before or something?
No, not at all. The first person that mentioned this was LS, actually, back when he was still on the team, but it was more of a loose thought he had.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking. Maybe I saw a YouTube video or something. It was just like just spitballing a concept of what you could do.
Could be, yeah. And then right after the playoffs ended, it was clear that Summit and the support situation had to change, so they removed Summit and removed supports. And then it became clear to me after a while that my best chance of making Worlds or playing in a good team would be on C9 as a support player. So I thought I'd rather play support in C9. If you have Jensen in mid and Fudge back in top lane, I think the team's actually really good, and I think that we can actually make Worlds. So I thought, yeah, I'd rather play here in a good team than play in like a lower tier team as ADC and probably have, low chances of making Worlds. So that's why we're here.
Well, I think also it makes sense because you're known to have a really strong, like, grinding work ethic within the team and to be a big voice on the teams that you're part of. You've also played yourself as an AD carry with, very vocal supports like Mithy in the past. So I think you have a very strong sense of like who you are as a player and what you want to accomplish. And what you like out of supports. So I think it's interesting to have you now apply those same opinions towards becoming a support for a player like Berserker yourself. We'll hold that for a second. So what was the process of this boot camp? Like, what was how was this supposed to work and how did it end up working?
I mean, we had the thing in 2020 or like before 2020 started with me and Vulcan boot camping together for like a month, and then we boot camp as a team afterwards, and it made us so much better than everyone else in spring 2020. So we thought we would do it again and it could maybe, replicate that kind of result. But then my green card process was very scuffed. There was a lot of issues with it because of the Ukraine thing going on. The conflict made it so that there weren't any times available. So I had to fly around to different countries, to Sweden and to Norway to get the medical checks and to get my interview and stuff. It's a long story, but it was complicated. It took a lot more time. Then the embassy lost my passport, so I had to get a new passport. And then it took a long time. I never made it, right? But the idea was to scrim in Korea and play solo queue with Berserker, get a lot of reps in and get to know each other for a long time. But that never happened, so it was just very scuffed, really. And then it took a long time for Berserker to come to NA, and for me as well, because my green card thing took a long time to process and get sent back and forth between Sweden and Denmark, where I was getting my thing processed. So yeah, it was just a really big scuffed offseason that were kind of out of our hands. Well, at least mine, in that sense, right? Berserker lost his passport because he's a moron, right? But yeah.
Wait, since as you're saying you were getting a green card, obviously people don't know that takes years and years, and this whole thing's not something you do overnight. Is that also part of why basically you were willing to like just sit out a split and just stay in Cloud9 or whatever? Like, I assume it's not as simple, like, because obviously a fan would say just go to the worst team that'll offer you a starting spot, right?
Yeah, I mean,
or next best team rather,
Yeah, but the thing is, like, I don't even know where I would go as an ADC. Like, I never really explored options in that sense. I thought, like, this is the best for me. I finished my green card here. The team's actually really good. And even if I don't play ADC for one split, I will still be a good ADC player in 6 months if this whole thing doesn't work out. Yeah. I'm sure of it, right? I think
it's like the logic of what Whipple thought, I'm sure, when he did the role swap.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure Whipple playing jungle for a split made him a better top laner because he knows so much more about the game now than before. And so I'm comfortable knowing that this year might not work out, and then I'll play something else, or maybe I'll stick to it. Depends on what happens, right? We'll have to judge after the season is over. But regardless, I'm really okay playing support and just seeing what happens. I think that this team can make Worlds, and I think that I'm probably the weakest player on the team right now in this moment. I have a lot of catching up to do because the meta is changing constantly. So I have to play, I spent like 100 plus games playing Nautilus, Leona, and then suddenly the champions like Renata coming out, it's range meta. There's these fun champs like Bard and Pyke and Mumu that can be nice to have, right? So I have to spend time practicing the meta champions while other support players can practice the off meta and the niche picks. So
yeah, sure.
I mean, you're also coming into a meta where, at least globally, we're seeing more fasting AD carries. So then you have to farm as like a support.
Yeah.
It's weird.
There's definitely some catching up to do for me, but I think that this team, when I get good, can be a really good team. So
by the way, I thought when I watched the games, I was going to roast you because if you're going to swap to support, then instantly play Yuumi. It's like, all right, mate.
I mean,
but you actually were really good, mate. Like
really
your
good.
actual lane play was fucking sick. You were actually doing work on Yuumi. You weren't just sat there doing nothing.
Yeah, I mean, Yuumi is actually not. It's a very fun chance because it has a very low floor, also very high ceiling. It's like so easy to play Yuumi and just be like not useless. Just sit on one guy, press heal on him every couple seconds. You can play with your feet if you want to. But then again, if you play really well in teamfight, you can get the shield procs, the mana back. You can block skill shots like bubbles and stuff like that, leasing Qs, whatever it is. So he actually has a very high skill ceiling. I think even in that game, I could play better, even looking at the replay and stuff. So, but yeah, Yuumi is just like, it's meta and it's really strong. And it's good with champs like Siri and tanks and Brewsters, and they're meta. So you're playing fucking Yuumi. And Tamken Senna, it's what it is.
I think that game was very impressive to me because a lot of good Yuumi play is knowing how to make switches at the right time to who needs to do things in a team fight or who needs the heals. And it's also being able to pop off without getting caught by crowd control. So you have to know a lot of different ability cooldowns on the enemy team and track those very carefully. And you were doing all of that extremely well. So yeah, I mean, I think that's probably one of the best, if not the best, like Yuumi games from an NA player that we've seen in LCS. So for you to come in right off the bat and have that level of game sense as a support player, I thought was very impressive.
Yeah, I did get play of the game, but I don't think I played that well. But I think Yuumi is harder to play in games where you're playing as like Wukong or Talia, where the rocks interrupt you, like instantaneous CC like that. It's very hard to play against. But in their game against CLG, they had like Senna TK, Yone, they have mid, some useless champ. Zoe, very good for Yuumi to play against, so it's very easy to play. But still, I think that we did well in that game. I think that laning phase, there was a little bit of an oopsie here and there, but overall, a good game. I'm happy with that game. It gave me a confidence because we had a kind of rough week of scrims in before week 2. We had a good week of week 1 scrims, and I was really confident. Then 2-0, and then we got kind of reality checked last week in scrims by Liquid and EG. So we're getting there.
Before we get into more of the contemporary stuff with the specific games from the past couple of weeks, I want to go back real quick and just ask about the green card situation. So is this an application, or do you have your green card yet? Or
I am done.
You are done. You have it.
Yeah. No, I don't have it in my hand. So the thing is, once you're done with the process, get this like 5 kilo stack of papers. You have to surrender to the airport upon arrival. So I did that. And then they gave you up to 90 days, I think, before you receive the little sticker, the actual green card, right?
Yeah.
So in about a month, 2 months, I will have the card in my hand.
And then you're an NA resident, which is huge.
I mean, the guy said, "Welcome home" when I arrived in the airport. It was kind of fucking weird, right? I was like, right, yeah, welcome home. But it is done, yeah, and I'm considered a resident, I suppose. I have like a temporary green card in my passport that will get removed once I get the little sticker, and then I have that ID card as my actual green card.
That is when you've completed the game of how to make money in League of Legends. When you're already a good import player and you're now an NA resident, and now they have an extra
and you're a support
on the team.
And you're a support.
You getting caught, don't worry. And you're a support player as well, yeah.
You're an import player who plays support, who counts as a resident. Is actually, the timing is absolutely impeccable for this change because the NA support pool is just been weak.
It's just him and his old mate Vulcan. It's just him and Vulcan just going, like, me and you. Am I the best of you? Who gives a fuck? The rest are all shit anyway.
I mean, it's a huge advantage. So I think the roster swap probably, the role swap probably is going to be good for you potentially in the long run. But
I think right now the green card doesn't change anything because we don't have an import cap on our team. We only have Berserker, right?
Right.
Flash, Blabber, Jensen already are residents, and I am gonna be soon. I actually don't know if I count as a resident yet in the league's terms. But it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter right now, right? Like you say, it doesn't matter, but it could matter next year, right?
Yeah, but in the future, it could open up more possibilities, both for me and for C9 if I continue playing here. Depends on what happens this year. If I'm shit at support, I'm sure they don't want to have me next year, and I'm aware of that, and they're aware of that. So. But in that case, my green card will be allowing me to be sold for more money anyway. So it's only going to help me in every way possible.
You know what's perfect as well, Monty? Here's what I'm really looking forward to. Because the split began without C9 having the real roster, who did they play in the first game? EG. So it means they don't play EG until the end of the regular split, which means he doesn't have to actually have his real battle with old pal Vulcan until the end when he's had a whole split to power up. So that's the fight I'm waiting for, because someone's got to fucking mog someone, just fucking style on them, do some crazy shit. There's got to be they've got at least like some hover in the draft or something. We've got to get something in that game. That game's going to be fire, I can tell.
I'm looking forward to it. I think
because Vulcan's going to try and do some shit to show you up. I guarantee.
Yeah, I think without doubt, right now Vulcan is the best support in the LCS, at least the best performing, right? Like you can say something like Code J is, more. Yeah. He won Worlds and some LCS titles, grats, right? But Code J is not playing that well right now. T as a whole actually is like 5-2, I think, but not playing that well compared to EG, who's really clean, had that one game against CLG. But Vulcan is playing really well, and he's definitely the one to look out for right now. So I'm kind of happy that that the 1 week went to 0-3 was against the 2 best teams in the league, at least the best team in the league in EG. So
Well, we
kinda
talked
good.
about that. Like, it was actually a good way to structure the split for you because even if you had your full roster, because of the boot camp situation that we talked about earlier, you guys would not be in the same like level of practice, especially with EG coming off of MSI, TL just having this Korean boot camp together, right? So you know they have an established roster that they've been using for this year, so it probably would have been kind of challenging for you guys anyway. So losing those matches that early probably wasn't a big thing, and you've already bounced back. And realistically, you only have to make top 6 in order to,
I think it's
make
top
it
8
into
in
the.
summer.
Well,
It's
it's
still
top
top
8,
eight, believe it or
but
not, yeah.
7 and 8 are in the lower brackets
yeah,
automatically. So
yes.
top 6 matters, so you actually get like
Sure.
2 chances. Yeah, you don't want to be 7th, 8th, and just have to
No.
never lose. That would suck a lot.
I mean, even if it wasn't low bracket, I still wouldn't be 7 by 8. So
yeah. I mean, you're not going to be 7th or 8th. Like that's
Hopefully.
obvious. That's obvious. But when the next question I have is, how did you approach the role swap? So you obviously were going through all this bureaucratic nightmare, having to fly around.
Yeah.
What was the structure that you set for yourself, knowing that you weren't going to be able to practice with Berserker? Like, how did you say, okay, these are the things that I want to do, like I need to do in order to make this role swap successfully? Did you design like a training program for yourself? Did your coaches help you with that? What happened?
I had a little bit of help from both Veigar and Cecil, who watched my solo queue games, gave me some feedback, but it's hard to really give you feedback from solo queue games. But I really just played a lot of solo queue. I played champions that are meta. I watched MSI games. I looked, on YouTube for some point of views of support players. There's some channels out there that have point of views, basically a pro view for free of pro players from MSI or from Worlds or some from
It's just suck there isn't pro view anymore. It'd be the perfect time for it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it really is a good
Yeah.
app and good thing, but it just sucks that I guess there's not enough people subscribing to it. But it's what it is. But yeah, I watched some pro views. I watched some lots of the good sport players that do things that aren't just sit in lane and do the thing. So I watch people like Hens right now, for example, performing really well. I like his playstyle. I like his pocket picks. I watched Hillsang. I watched Mickey X. I watched any players, Cordier and Vulcan mostly. I look for the things that they do. I kind of watch the games and think to myself, if I was basing right here, where would I go from base? He goes top or mid or something. I'm like, I'll probably not go there. Try to figure out why they do that and put myself in their shoes, and that's how I kind of get there.
It's Hillsang as crazy as the perception is.
Yeah, I mean, he really is a crazy person that makes plays. He sees angles no one else ever sees, but he also plays champs like Pyke, Cillian, Rakan, and he finds the angles that are really, really good. And that kind of X factor, having the last pick Pyke, last pick Bard, Hillsang, Cillian, like it can really carry games. And
for sure.
I think it's something that I want to be as well. I don't want to be the guy who can't play Cillian or can't play Pyke, Bard, or Amumu, or fucking Nico with Kalista, like Singed against Yumi, that kind of guy. So I'm definitely looking up to these kind of people that have the ability to play those champs.
The only problem I have with Hillsang is he's sort of like a Don Quixote figure, Monty, because some of those angles I'm not sure actually exist. I think they're just in his mind only. Some of them do, which are genius that no one else can see. But sometimes I think he goes for players where it's like, did you see a shadow come out? What are you going for there, bro? I'm almost what's going on here?
It does happen. It does happen.
And I can't lie, I've told this story before, but it's true. When he did that one game a few years back in LEC, where he did like the fucking terrorist Pyke split push and won the game, that actually just ruined, I've ruined so many people's solo queue games because I saw that game.
Like, I'm the hero now.
And was aware it was possible in a losing game. I've ruined so many games and I've won so few of them as well. So I apologize to everyone who accidentally got queued in me because Hillsang made me do it. It's like Gangster Rap made me do Ice Cube.
So I'm curious about it. Was there one aspect of you playing as a support where you were saying, I played with so many different supports over many years now, and all of them tilted me because they wouldn't do this fucking thing that I really wanted as an AD carry? Is there some aspect of your play that's like, I'm going to be the first one to actually do this shit right for my ADC?
I mean, I don't really think so. I think that, in any environment, you can give your support feedback and they'll probably try to do it. But I think that like I said earlier, I want to be the guy who can play everything. Some support players can't play certain champs or they don't want to spend time practicing it. And I want to be the guy who can play those champs I mentioned earlier and who can whip out something funny, and last pick. I can play Senna as well, for example. Most supports can't play Senna. I actually think it's an advantage to have a support player playing Senna because it's a champ with the wards, whereas the ADC wants to play a champ that farms most of the time. when it comes to champs like Tom, I understand why it's the support player who plays the Tom Kench because they're familiar with it. But when it comes to champions like Wukong or Swain or whatever, I think it's actually an advantage that you have your support player playing center. So I kind of want to be that guy who can play those champs and not be a let down to the team. So yeah, that's what I'm striving for right now.
What about this then? Because I would say the classic thing ADCs always complain about with their support is if an ADC ever goes in on the 2v2, you're supposed to just trust me, bro, and we just go in and we do it. And we fight to the death and we either gloriously win like heroes or we go out on our fucking shield. There's one rule you hate is when they don't quite go in and then you just lose the 2v. Do you commit? Do you do the like basically what you wish your support would do? Do you just go in? Do you trust it completely?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I watch people like MikeX and Hillsong, especially in the past, they had this like whatever it takes mentality of just if the team is going, I'm going no matter what. I don't care if I'm dying 10 times this game, I'm just going. And that's just how it is, right? And they never had this thing where one day behind, they never play for KDA. They look for like the 5% chance of winning the game versus the never ever winning the game and just losing no matter what, but having a better KDA.
Yes.
So I really respect the people that don't care about their stats and their looks, and they just go for the small chances. They suicide for the team if they have to, you know, and that's something that I admire in Hillsong. He does not care about getting flack for feeding or having 10 deaths. He will do what he thinks is best to carry the game. You know, it's
Dude, that is underrated though, because in my opinion, like it's usually jungle and support. They're the ones where it's like where we're just losing the game hard. You have to do some stupid play, and if it fails, you're going to look stupid, and the fans going to go, "What an idiot he fed!" And it's like, no, if I don't do that, like we have no chance to win this game.
Yeah, exactly.
Like crazy. Yeah,
it's very easy to just be like, you know, the ADC or mid laner, and you're like 0-0-X, right? You're like 0-3 in a game of 25 minutes, and you did nothing the whole game because you just farmed and then you lost the game. That's like a typical NALCS or LCK game where the teams just give everything, never fight anything, and you just lose one team fight, and then they go down mid and end. That's a very common theme these days, and I think that watching Hillsong and MikeX in the past, they would never do that. They would always go down swinging. And I think that is better. Just say like, "Alright, guys, we get this spike, we fight this dragon, and we just fucking fight. And if we lose, it's GG." That's what it is, right? That's much better in my head than just bleeding until they have Soul and Elder and Baron, and you can't win no matter what. Yeah.
Indeed.
So how's it when you've spent, so you were with Cloud9 even though you weren't playing on the LCS roster, right? Earlier this year. So how would you describe Berserker as a person, and then also his play style, before we get into how your synergy with him has been going?
Berserker is very funny. His English wasn't so good for the most part, but he's actually a very funny guy once he gets talking, and I enjoy playing with him a lot. I think he's a very consistent player. I think that he's very, very good at team fighting and late game is where he shines. But he also is an aggressive player that wants to win lane. He just doesn't value win lane as much as scaling. He always prioritizes the champs like Siri that scales, what isn't so strong in lane. You know, Siri Yumi was like one of our good things in the match against CLG. You don't win lane with Siri Yumi against most things, but you can farm. And then once teamfight phase starts, it's just free win. Run over them and win. So he always values that. I think in last split, he was very good on champs like Jinx and Aphelios. He's very mechanically adept. So that's something I'm grateful for. I'm very critical of his gameplay, obviously. His laning phase, his making, his builds. I think he is a bit stupid when it comes to things like builds and runes. He always just goes what someone else does. I ask him like, this game, this game you have fleet against 3 tanks instead of Conquer and Aphelios. Why is that? He's like, opens a vault. Look, T1 Gumayusi has fleet.
There you go.
I'm like, bro, he's playing against Jace and you know, like Ezreal and Corki. Of course he has fleet. You're playing against Ornn and Sejuani. Like, bro, you need to have Conquer, right? Or like he buys Collector against, you know, triple tanks. I'm like, bro, please buy Dominics, right?
Yeah,
that kind of thing. He's very not autopilot, but he just doesn't think that much about those things. So I'm.
Can you tell if you tell him that in the game, like if you're like in champ select, you're like, please change your rune, or can you say, do you like remind him in the game, like, hey, like please don't build this.
We talk a lot about things like what summer spell he has this game. I tell him, I think if I was playing, I would go cleanse this game or heal this game and this blah blah blah. Lane, I think is blah blah, you know. And so I'm definitely more involved in his decisions than most supports players would be, because I actually know what I'm talking about for his part. So that I think helps his improvement.
Did he actually know who you were before he joined Cloud9?
I actually don't know. He doesn't know who people like. I told him some stories about Origin, and I said, "Do you know Xpeke?" He was like, "Who?" So I don't think he knows too much about the EU lore. He's a zoomer for sure. So I'm afraid
You
I'm
guys
afraid he
did
doesn't
make
know
a
how good
semi
I
at
am.
Worlds, so I mean,
Yeah,
I would think he would know something.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm not sure if he really knows the lore of EU, but I did play against him for a whole split in scrims when I was in the academy team. Well, I wasn't in the team, but I was scrimming with the academy team against him, and we were doing very well. Overall, it's like I would say 5-5 win-lose for academy versus LCS for the most part. So I think he does know that I'm good at the role, and
Okay.
I think he does care
Obviously,
about my opinion.
right.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's quite young in his career. How would you compare him to when you were at your peak?
I think that when I was his age in my rookie season, I was better. I think that I was very good in my rookie season. That's undeniable, I think. But I think that he's very mechanically gifted right now. And I think that with time, his weaknesses aren't mechanics or hands. It's just brain. I think that right now English speaking ability is holding him back a little bit. I think that once that gets better, he's more comfortable with the team. He actually cares a lot about things like Herald and moving for objectives and dragons. He has like the late game in mind a lot. I think that once it gets a little bit better with English, he will actually have a lot of voice, a big voice in the team.
Right.
And I think that's when he will become the best player that he can be. So I think that late summer this year, he will be by far the best ADC.
I don't know if you remember this, Monty, but like back, I think it was actually in like season 6 or something. Back in the day when Zven was still, I think it might have been when he just joined G2. I can't quite remember, but I remember there was the famous flame where the flame war actually started between like bloody fucking, I think it was like Freeze and Steel back when they were still ADCs. But then good old Forgiven just jumped in and he said the infamous line where he said that like he referenced Zven and Reckless, who at the time had vaguely similar styles of playing the teams were in, and he called them the Scandinavia Wonder Boys, right? It was essentially implying, they were sort of like the kids born with the silver spoon in their mouth. Everything was easy. Well, all I'm going to say is respect to Zven. He's finally become one of the help. He's now a butler. So there you go. Just ask me, Dirk, how's it doing? So would you like that? Whatever you need.
Always fun to think about that. SK Gaming chose Forgiven over me, right? And then I actually don't know if I talk about this a lot before, but I did tryouts for SK Gaming in 2014 at the end of the year, and it went really bad. That one scrim I had with them went terrible, and they chose Forgiven. And then a month later, I got an opportunity from Fnatic and from Origin, same week basically. And I always think about how grateful I am that Forgiven was better in that moment on that time, right? And now I'm playing. And then I played in a much better team. So it's fun to think about that. That was the case. So, but yeah, good old times. Kind of miss it, honestly. The banter was different back then than it is now.
It was wild. It was raw, wasn't it? I know.
It was good times. Yeah, I do miss Freeze and Forgiven coping that me and Reckless were on good teams, but just lucky or whatever, right? It was good times.
Yes.
So speaking of like you scrimming against Berserker, how was it operating with because one of the reasons I think you came back was the opportunity to actively scrim against the LCS team, right? You agreed to the situation that you were going to be in at the start of this year, because there was a big push from Cloud9 at the beginning to really set you guys up as like hard scrim partners. Did they really do that? And was it successful in your mind?
Yeah, when Els was there, at first we were scrimming 2 days a week against the LCS team, and the scrims had like purpose. We would play the same draft 3 games in a row until the LCS team won, or like we'll play certain champions that they want us to play. So yeah, at first they had a purpose and they were kind of useful, I think. But there's always this one thing where LCS teams that are really good, for example, don't want to scrim a lower tier academy team because it's a waste of time at the moment. But if you invest in that academy team, they will eventually become the best academy team, and maybe even a top tier LCS team, top tier, but like top 5, 6, 7, whatever, right?
It's not that hard to be a top 6
at that point.
team.
Yeah, sure, yeah. And at that point, they're the best scrim partner you can have because you can hide things. And with LS, that was really useful because he would make them play things like Soraka mid or the Gwen Ivern mid jungle thing, right? And many more things like that. So when Ivern mid jungle pops up in your LCS scrims, there's two outcomes. Either the other team immediately starts playing it if it's good, and then someone else is in scrims and they're like, that's kind of fishy. That's probably from that team with LS, right? And then you go on stage, it's banned. So it can be valuable.
We were talking about this earlier, like how scrim metas like develop.
I mean, you get stumped by Ivern mid jungle, you're like, this was kind of OP, so I'll play it.
Even if the team doesn't use it, the team you scrimmed against is talking to their mid laners, like talking to some other mid laners, like, oh, we saw this in scrims, and then what do you guys think of it? Like, how do you beat this or whatever, right? And they're talking to somebody in Europe, and like,
they might not be leaking,
somebody in Korea. Then all of a sudden it appears in Korea because like your Korean player was talking to the Korean, like his Core's talking to his buddies over on T1 or whatever, right? So
it won't take long before the news get out one way or another. So
agreed.
I think the Academy also scrims were useful. There were some troubles, like Blabber didn't like that he was playing against Karthus and Evelyn and Udyr every game, Hecarim, when the meta was like Lee Sin, Xin Zhao, Jarvan, I think was the spring split meta for the most part. So in his mind, he gets worse practice. But from my point of view, we actually won a lot of games in Academy against LCS, so maybe the champions weren't so bad. And LS was sometimes, if Academy team drafted for themselves, it's a normal scrim game, both teams draft their own champs, and then Academy won, LS would make them play the same draft until they won, like 3 or 4 games in a row, because he was convinced the draft was good. This happened with one time with the Gwen Iron thing, where Academy won like 2 or 3 games in a row, and then the 4th game they won, and we didn't play draft again. I just
love the way he's doing salty runbacks in scrims.
Yeah, it's literally salty runback.
I love it. That's the most LS thing ever. Do it again, it works. Yeah. You did it wrong, it works.
In some way, it was a good thing, because it's proving to you that the draft wasn't the problem, right?
Sure,
because
yeah.
I speak here as a player, that number one cope players use is they blame draft. After every game, fucking draft. I went 0-10, fucking draft, man. Shit coach, man. Fuck. So that's like a very common thing, and that was been good for that moment, because I think Gwen Iron was really OP and it was so easy to play as well. Just don't lose early game, 10 minutes and it's GG. Give one dragon, one herald, and you win. So, but it also, I think LS was good in a lot of different ways, not just for organizing the in-houses, but it's always hard because there's this balance between is scrimming EG or TL just better than scrimming Academy team because they're better players, better laning phase practice for everyone, better mechanical practice, team fighting, all that. Or is making your Academy team better for the long-term investment better? So it's a hard thing to balance, where I think if your Academy team is just dog shit, it's just not worth it at all. But C9 has traditionally had a pretty good Academy team overall. They've always been like a top 1, 2, 3-ish team, so it can be worth it, I think, to put some time into it.
I will say, though, I do think a flaw that it sounds like LCS teams still do is, when you have those times when the league's top heavy, like there's 3 teams that are all amazing, then everyone else is like whatever. The mistake they make is when they only practice each other. Because I can tell you historically, the reason why classically teams don't do a boot camp when in the old days it's just 2 teams is because all you do is just eventually you figure out you're not even practicing the game, you're just practicing against that one team, and you just tailor everything to exactly what they do. And it can also lead you down, like we were joking earlier about on the segment before, about like when people bring something into a scrim meta and then you think you're playing against the person who drafted it on purpose.
Exactly, yeah.
And they're just playing it because it was drafted and busted, and you think, I can deal with this. It's like you can't. You're not even playing the real champion. Like that can happen if you play the same team 50 times, even if they're the best team. Sometimes you want a bit of variety just so you're playing real league still,
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think that it's worth putting time into organizing your scrim schedule. For example, last week we scrimmed TL ones, EG ones, one of Thieves ones, and then we scrimmed one team we played last week, Dignitas, right? And I think that's a good way to do it. Scrim each team once, see what they have to say, and often when you're top tier team, you often give the lower tier teams one scrim day, and if they're really shit, never again. It's called the blacklist. It's a very common thing that happens where you're like, this is not worth it. I remember in 2020 we were stomping everyone. Some teams didn't want to scrim us because the scrims were just too unproductive. It was just stomps over and over again.
Yeah, I remember you saying, especially on
Fridays. Yes.
Yeah, I was gonna say the day before LCS, nobody would scrim you because they didn't want to like get their
literally
absolutely destroyed and then have to go to LCS the next day with like the black cloud hanging over their head. Yeah, I remember you saying.
Remember the main thing they all complain about in America is that they can't play on fucking Korean solo queue and play against Korean teams. They're like, how are we supposed to get better when the quality is so much better in Korea? Then a team in NH gets really good. Well, we can't play against them. They beat us all the time. You just don't want to fucking win, do you? It's so fucking whack, isn't it? It's so whack. I know. Yeah, but then have a lower morale before I play. Yeah, because you're bad. Guess what? The trick to getting good is you have to be bad first. You have to go through being bad. Because you don't even play the bloody game, do you? You can't. Like, what is that? Like, scrim less. That'll make us better. Like, how is that ever going to make any sense?
I do agree with your sentiment, but it is true that if you're like, we have this thing called IMT speedrun, where we would try to win the scrim block as fast as possible, and our record was like 3:30 when normally it's like 5 hours.
Obviously, is IMT the one you just roll in most of the time, and they're the easiest to beat.
in their case, I understand if you get stomped 5 games in a row, it isn't actually worth it to scrim. You just can't play the game past
I see what you
interface.
mean. Okay.
At that point, you can just like, okay, scrim someone
Okay.
else, right? But for
Yes.
teams that are better, they should probably scrim that's good practice at the time, right? So
Indeed.
it goes both ways, but it was a good old times. Nowadays, we don't win as many scrims, which I don't know if it sucks. It's kind of a good thing, I think. I think that nowadays there's no one that wins every scrim every day, so scrims by now have gotten better. I just wish people played more Champions Queue. I like Champions Queue a lot. I think it's the best thing that happened to NA in a long time. I haven't played solo queue in NA for almost 6 months now, I think, and it's great. I'm enjoying it a lot. I'm a very low win rate player right now in Champions Queue, which is unfortunate, but I did enjoy it a lot, and I think it's much better quality practice than the alternative. Just solo queue and low
By the
ping.
way,
So.
I don't know if it's because it's too many years ago now, but people barely even seem to comment on the fact that, like, the angle I thought was fun was like, how has no one noticed that fucking Jensen and Sven are in the same team now? Imagine going back to that fucking final bit and be like, in a few years, you play together. I mean, the wildest angle, this is where people really haven't connected the narratives. Remember the story last year? He was going to roll swap to ADC. Bro, that has to just happen at some point in the future. So you can do some fucked up Danish odd couple scenario where it's like, one's tall, one's short, one fucking plays ADC. Now I play ADC. Whoa, what's going on? Like that. That'll be the ultimate fucking, your personalities are totally different. It'd be all over. It'd be an amazing comedy show.
Jensen actually does play some games of ADC in Champs Queue. Like when it's past midnight,
Okay.
you can off roll to get the games going because there's not that many people playing after midnight. So I did play with him. He's not bad. It wasn't too shabby. But the thing that happened in finals was just, I don't know. It was I don't regret doing it at all, and it was fun to me at the time. Still is, and we talk about it sometimes now, and we joke about it. And
it's psychological warfare, you know. Try to fuck with the guy a bit.
Sure.
Yeah,
of course. And I enjoyed it, and I think that he maybe didn't, but he does laugh at it now, and he won, right? So
exactly. Yes, you can be magnanimous and see he won, can't he? And also fucking get over it, mate. Yeah. Or in his case, maybe he never will get over it.
I enjoyed it back then, and now he enjoys it the rest of the time. So
in the end, Sven, you can be the bigger man.
Yeah, I mean, I can own up to my mistakes, no problem. Like that final doesn't haunt me at all. Like, I wish we would have won, obviously, right? And it would have been great for TSM and my time there, because I feel like my time at TSM, I didn't play that well overall, and it was a sad way to end a 2-year process with 0 wins in finals, just one final only. So
those lines, by the way, obviously the worst thing about that final in particular is that one fucking E into that bush has now, people act like you do that every game, dude. Like that has almost haunted you in your career. And the reason why that sucks so much is because when I remember your rookie year, you were clean as fuck as an ADC, dude. You were doing a really good job. Like I feel like people have now just like tarred you with that brush that you're like the guy who just didn't randomly now.
Yeah, there's definitely like a bit of like thing where if you do something really bad once, people kind of like brand you as that guy, right, for the rest of the time. Whereas someone like, let's say like last 2 weeks, Hansama's been griefing half his games, being caught left and right, solo killed by Johnson 10 times same game, and nobody will say, oh, Hansama gets caught every game, right? Because Hansama has this like good status as a player where everyone likes him and he played well at Worlds and Rogue and team that was losing and stuff. So it's definitely true that sometimes you can get branded as something, but it's also like a certain thing that happens to pro players where some people get a lot of flack for mistakes, also get a lot of praise. People like Double Lift or Reckless or Perks, and then some people just get shit on no matter what, and if they play well, they don't get any praise, like Promiscu, for example. And that's a big reason why I stopped using social media, because it just triggers me that like one guy can solo kill another guy up 10 levels and 5k gold, and he's like, whoa, insane play, man! And then one other guy does something similar, and it's like, nice, solo kill, good job, you know, like. And then some people's mistakes are just highlighted so much more than others, and it's like this fucking annoying process of social media that I just hate. So I stopped using things like Reddit. I still tweet sometimes when we win, but I dodge social media when I'm losing, because I can't handle people that are annoying on social media. Even like normal people that talk about politics or whatever, it just fucking triggers me, you know? So
I know. We talk about this. Twitter used to be fun in like 2015. It's just really not fun now.
Nowadays, it feels like there's some guy who's trying his hardest to find a way to be triggered about what you said and take one little sentence out of the whole context and then use it against you. And you're like, bro, that wasn't my tweet, you know, like the straw man or whatever it's called.
Or also, I was just tweeting a joke, and like, come on, dude, it's just not.
Yeah, exactly. You know, some people take it way too serious. Whereas,
and then Reddit has just been now consumed by like the same 10 people who just post nonstop, and everyone with who is sane has just left. So it's just like the same.
Reddit is just Prisoner's Island at this point in time, isn't it, Monty? It's just the worst posters. Like all you need to know about Reddit is this. Remember, the mods do claim that they remove comments that are insulting, personal attacks or insults. There is one account there that I don't even need to say the name of because you all know it the second I explain that he is an LPL fan that has been there for 10 years who writes the most egregiously insulting fucking shit. If you ever dare comment on like the LCK, LPL, like this guy will just go fucking ham, and he has never been banned as far as I can tell. His shit's always on there, so like it's a nightmare, mate. Don't even go there. It's gotten worse. It's become like an apocalyptic wasteland now. Before there was like at least like an oasis every now and then, or like some one cool person you can meet. Now it's like everyone you meet. It's like, oh, there's a call for me. Kill myself. Oh, okay, cool, bro. Oh, another call. Better answer that. Like, give me a break. You know what I mean? Like, exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
You like open up a thread and you're like, wow, this is just all lies. Like,
I know.
I look about stuff about myself. I'm like, this is just incredibly factually inaccurate, and also really easy to prove that it's factually inaccurate. But I guess we're just all going to lie about me now. That's fun. So
this is one of the worst things about it is that sometimes when I had a bad game in the past, I would go into like a Reddit thread or Twitter post and see something about someone rewriting history, right? Saying like,
yes,
oh, Svenningsen actually weren't that good in the past either. Like we were in TSM, right? And people were saying stuff like we got stomped at Worlds by CLG bot lane. I'm like, let me just see here. Google, YouTube, CLG versus G2, playing like Jin Brown against Kayla Nami, 3 bot lane bans. I'm like, we're up in CS or equal in CS. We're not getting stomped. We're losing lane matchup and we're equal, right? And people are just like, I got stomped by CLG at Worlds, Dixon, Afro, fucking best players in the world, fucking shit bot lane, best in the West, haha, XD, right? And that's such a terrible thing to do because
exactly.
Your current bad performances shouldn't undermine your past achievements. That's something I really just discuss. But I don't care enough about it to like start arguing with people on Twitter. That's like when you lose the most. Thorin would know about this.
But it is just the flagrant lies that are just the most annoying, right? Where you're like, it's like this is just so easy to prove that it's a lie, but then everybody's like, oh, really? That's how it was, and they just like agree with it without even checking. Like, what the fuck is happening here? It's just horrible.
My favorite is when in the same thread they're like, well, look, this guy just said earlier it happened, and he links to a comment in that thread itself. It's like, holy shit, we're now citing the thread itself. We made some sort of fucked up Wikipedia nightmare reference system. Like, what is this? That's another guy who doesn't know what he's talking about. What?
It's very sad because Reddit actually used to have like a direct influence on people's opinions of others, which is really bad that could happen. Like I don't think like professional football or soccer for Americans managers would go into a Reddit post and be like, so who played well today? Let me see here. Yeah. Like that doesn't happen. But I actually do think, and I'm sure it has happened before, that some player who has a good rep on Reddit or Twitter has gotten a better chance in some team or some tryout, whatever, somewhere. So it's definitely like problematic that people care so much about it. But I think it's getting better nowadays. I think teams actually have real talent scouts and tryouts, and they have resources to watch people. So it's getting better in that regard for sure. But
I think it also helps that, a lot of people in the early days, you didn't get a lot of people with high game knowledge, but as pro players retire, as, people who have had high game knowledge, like, at a high level, analysts like casters like Deficio or Papa Smithy or these guys are moving into GM roles. Like it really helps.
I agree.
Helps that process.
So I totally agree with what Sven said earlier, though. Like, what's crazy is, like, there are definitely those people who are just never allowed to win. Like, no matter what, like, Promiscue is the best example. If people don't know, the Reddit messaging went like this, right? They already hated him because he used to be bad years ago in LEC, right? Then his major fuck up was that thing where he just flamed the Baus FFS, who everyone loves. So that just made people like, fuck Promiscue. And I'm not joking, Monty. They just had a whole split where he was actually playing pretty well, where they just acted like he entered every game. Like, nobody could watch these games in good faith and be, he's garbage. They made out like he couldn't even have played in LCK. He was actually good. He was, like, probably the best player on Astralis, wasn't he? He was actually pretty decent, like, mate. He was solid. And so the joke is, the one bloody actually good split he had in LEC got him fired because these idiots on Reddit were just like, nah, he's just bad no matter what. And he's everything he was 4 years ago. Or bloody more like 7 years ago now or something. Like, if you can't grow after 7 years, how was anyone going to fucking improve at the game? He had 7 years to improve, guys.
I mean, it could also be other things, But yeah,
Oh, and then the other one is you go the other way, and then famously they'll just pick a random player and just overhype. Like the obvious example again was fucking Adam in the summer split last year. Look, he was having some good games on like off meta champs. They made it sound like he was like the fucking next coming of Soaz, and he was going to be like the god top laner for like 10 years in Europe. He's not even in LEC anymore. People don't know. What were you going to say anyway, Sven? Did you have something about Promiscue?
I forgot what I was going to say, but I said that
fair enough.
I'm not like a big fan of bad solo queue behaviors. It could also be that, right? I'm not going to say that's a good thing to.
I know we talked about it on a Crackdown. I know we're on a similar page. The problem is this, right? Is that they all think solo queue is like, oh, how could he be rude? But it's like, that's why I'm practicing, bro. I'm trying to be like the best player in the world. Like, I'm taking these games seriously. Like, I think on some level, like, I think it's unacceptable that like pros even like that's why the Champions queue. I'm no surprise you play it, mate. Why the fuck would you want to practice against randoms as streamers if you're a pro? It's garbage, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think Champions queue is a really great, and it's getting used more now than in Spring Split. The queues are shorter, at least for me. Maybe it's because I was with the sport, but
no, I think it has been more active because a lot of people, towards the end of spring, everybody was like, nobody's playing it anymore. And then like all the fucking idiots on social media were like, let's witch hunt the guy who's not playing Champions queue. But from the people I've talked to at the start of summer, it seems like Champions queue is really active right now.
Yes. It seems like there's a lot of games running every day. The moment it's 6 p.m., you queue up, you get pop immediately. So I'm a big fan of it, and I think it's a good concept. And there's making improvements to it all the time. Like there's an MMR system
people
now.
Play properly. Like obviously the main premise you have
to, otherwise you get booted, dude.
Like, right, that's good, cool.
And I like that people.
You have to be in voice comms.
No, you don't have to anymore.
You don't have to anymore. Okay.
Now you can opt in to voice or not, and you don't have to be before either. But before, if you weren't in voice comms, people would kind of like dislike you. They'd be like,
understandable,
This term, no comms, no mercy, because you would just love mercy. So it felt like that for a while, but I think the Champs queue is getting better and better every split. There's improvements made to the MR system, to the voice thing we mentioned, and it's just overall, I think, a good practice system. I wish that everyone played it. There are some downsides, like you can't hide your picks, and you feel bad about trying something new for the first time. So if I want to play, let's say, Pike support today, I'll probably just grief my teammates, and it'll feel a lot worse when a pro player does it to you in an actual practice environment. So in that sense, I can see it. And you can't hide certain picks if you want to pick something funny. But
voice comm sounds great in itself, though. Having a proper team on voice comm, that's already way better than just a random solo queue game. Yeah.
Also, just as a preview, I mean, Champions queue is going to be fucking great at Worlds this year. I mean, it's going to be insanely good streaming content, like really fun for
I wonder what they will do, because it will be kind of bad to have like Showmaker and stuff against fucking amateur player top 10 team.
Amazing.
That's like a too big difference. So maybe they have to restrict it at that point to just the world's teams plus LCS or something like that. I don't know, but yeah, Champions queue, lower ping, better players in every game. Full on rolls, no autofills, nothing. It's just better in every way than solo queue. So unless you want to hide your picks or something, so you can int or you can practice something funny, that's I think.
I wonder how they're going to handle Champions queue, actually, because as Worlds moves around NA, they're going to have to move the Champions queue server with the teams, most likely, I would think. So it'll have to be in the different locations.
They do that with the actual tournament server, though, so I think it wouldn't be that big of a deal to just move it along. But I guess that would affect everyone else playing from somewhere else in America.
Yeah,
like the
exactly.
Teams and stuff.
That's the question I have, because the tournament server is one thing, because it's just on the LAN. It's not like connected to the internet. So they'll have to do something different. But I'm sure they'll figure it out.
Yeah, there already is some players playing on Champions queue with lower ping than the pros, or like close to the same, or like some has 50 ping, some has 40. Like the LAN players, for example, have higher ping than the LCS pros, and that's just what it is, right? So, yeah, I think they'll just have to. Some people will just get a short end of the stick when Worlds comes around, because I think they can't make the pros that are playing Champions queue play on higher ping. Just can't.
Yeah.
I think that the Korean pros and the Asian pros in general will be very happy with this change, because they always had this thing where they hated anywhere else because of the high ping. I remember in World 16, there were so many people making jokes about how 60 ping, KW, right? And now it's only like 48 for most pro teams because of great internet connections, but still, it's much higher than the 8 to 10 ping they used to play on.
I also think that angle of having the voice comms, assuming people want to do it, is mad underrated though. Because there's another reason I always thought solo queue is such worthless practice for actual pros beyond just like basically keep your mechanics up or whatever. So you can't even bloody talk to your teammates and do any like moves together. The maddest is when people are typing in a fucking solo queue game. You're typing. We're doing fucking cybering now. Like what the fuck are you talking about? Like at that point, just be Chovy and just playing up. They know what you're doing, mate. Because I always thought like in League, it's such an OP game if you can talk to people with your actual voice. Like then you can work together.
Oh, yeah.
Like. The joke is like League in theory, sure, compared to some esports games, maybe it doesn't need the most voice comms. Like obviously CS:GO needs permanent voice comms. By the way, spoiler, I'm also a cunt in that game, Monty. Like I never ever enable voice comms because one, I don't want to hear anyone else say anything. They're bad information. It's gonna tilt me so hard if they say like he's behind you and he's not, and he's just in front of me and he kills me. So already I'd rather be blind and make my own decisions. And then secondly, as you can imagine, you're gonna think I'm being egotistical, I'm making this up. If I ever enable voice comms and I speak always like within one round, someone just goes, "You sound a bit like Thorin." It's like, fucking 2 rounds into the game now. Oh, fucking hell. 2 rounds in and this has happened already. So now I have to pretend I'm not me and just go, "Who is that?" or something, fucking some shit like that. Or I'm just highest hits anyway, so I wouldn't be talking anyway. Don't worry about it, boys. And it's going to be better that you can't scream at me when I try no scope and die or whatever. So don't worry about it. It's all good. It's all Gucci. Don't worry about
Voice
it.
comms are definitely great. I don't know how it would be in solo queue servers like EU, because in EU there's a lot of games that end up with like 2 players just going in a complete ego battle in the chat, right? I wonder if those people would actually join voice comms and it would make the games better. I don't really think so. But in Champs queue, the voice comms is actually a huge difference. I think that it's very often the thing that the team with most people on voice comms just wins over the team that has 4 people or 3 people, right? It's just like, oh, they have no jungler in voice comms, so their lanes will have better communication with jungler. They will have better, set up for ganks, this kind of stuff, and they'll be more on the same page. Oh, top lane non-comms, camp him the whole game, and he won't know where jungler is, because it's annoying as fuck for junglers in comms to have to say, jungler is probably here doing top camps, and then have to ping it for that one guy, or say in chat to that one guy that he's there as well, right? So you often miss out on communication that's valuable. Some people just join comms and don't say anything. That's fine. You don't have to say anything. Just listen to the jungler saying, jungler's here, I want to gank top, I'm going to path bot, careful to go top guys, like going Herald, blah, blah, basing now, these kind of things are useful. So I think that more and more people are getting more comfortable with just being on comms without saying anything, and that's good as well. I wouldn't want to force people to try to talk. Also, some LAN players don't have the best English or like whatever. That's fine. You're on comms, listen, you try. That's good enough for me.
Plus, it depends on the person. If you're Dardoc, maybe don't come on comms. You just play this one without, we'll be okay. We'll figure out what you're doing. Don't worry.
I believe he's actually in Champions queue, Dardoc. I think he's in as a coach, and he might actually be allowed to play. So maybe one day we'll see him. A return, Double D.
Well, with Kenvy's performance right now, I think that day might be coming sooner rather than later.
Yeah, IMT
you got to do something.
Well.
You got to do something at this point.
Yeah, IMT is kind of like a dead org as well at this point. They just don't seem to have any fans or any engagements, and their team isn't doing well for a very long time now. And not sure what happened to Immortals. They just went downhill, and they never stopped going downhill. So it's kind of sad to see, because IMT was a big team some years ago.
Sure, yeah. I mean, if people don't know, they are the team originally that caused all the bloody salary inflation, which is why Sven's even in NA right now. Otherwise, he'd probably be on like fucking Rogue or something trying to win worlds still. Oh, sorry, he's still trying to win worlds. I said the part out loud that was supposed to be quiet.
Reminder: I beat Rogue at Worlds this year.
Okay, fair play.
Maybe try a different team, maybe.
That's true. Fair play. Fair play. I was one of the only people who said that upset was possible, guys. I did call that one.
Well, I think a lot of like the direction changed a lot when Noah left Immortals, and I don't know. Like I think Immortals is an interesting case because the last couple of years they've been worse than their roster would make you think they are, and that's still true. You would look at the roster this split and you would say that it has been on paper improved from the roster last split, and it just. They can never catch a break. It feels.
It shouldn't be last place, surely, with this roster, Sven. Like on paper, this roster should be like at least like playoff team, like 8th team or something, right?
Not sure that's. I don't know who I would think on paper is necessarily worse than IMT, like straight up worse.
Like is PoE washed or something? Is he just not good at the moment?
No, I don't think he's washed, but I don't think that IMT players fit that well together. They need more people that do something. Can we
Maybe
and
do need
Power
Gardock
Evil.
then. Get him in there.
Like, what made Kenvi good was playing champs like Graves and Kindred, and now he's last picking Trundle and just farming the whole game. It just doesn't seem
My
like
lord, okay.
that really works.
Well, he's also like inting sometimes. I mean,
he's not playing well. I don't
he
disagree with it at all.
He seems to have a lot of nerves, at least when it comes to these stage games, because he is making really terrible individual plays.
No, I agree. Like, his strengths were playing champs like Kane, Kindred, Graves, Lucian, maybe, I think. And then now he's playing Trundle last pick. And what with Power Evil was playing with Thorin, right? That was his best time as a player, was playing with like a role player, so to speak, that played tanks and accommodated. Thorin's always been a very selfless player, whereas Kenvi's the opposite, right? So one of Kenvi or Power Evil have to adjust, and they aren't really seeming to be players that adjust. Kenvi doesn't seem to be a tank player that sits mid and dogs for Power Evil, and Power Evil always plays the same champion, same way, so might not be the best fit. And I'm not sure about, the rest. It doesn't feel to me like the rest of the players aren't necessarily top tier either. They do okay in their lanes usually, but then they just lose because they're a bad team. So I'm not sure who's actually worse than IMT on paper. I don't think anyone actually is at this point.
I mean, I think Dignitas is worse on paper, but
are they really?
Yes.
Okay, but like you compare like
just on the messy roster though.
Like I would think River is better, for example.
Oh,
I think
yes, sure.
Gamsu is worse than Revenge for sure.
Yes.
The bot lanes, I think that both ADCs are fairly similar. Neo has better strength on some champions than others. Lost is more consistent, I'd say. And then Biofrost versus Ignar, it's kind of like it's not that big of a difference either way, right?
It's not a
PoE,
great meta for Ignar either.
I agree with that. And sometimes people play worse in different teams because they're not used to something, but I don't see the big difference in those teams. But Dignitas games are more. There's more hope. IMT is almost getting perfect gamed every week these days, right? I think this was back-to-back weekends where they almost got perfect gamed, twice now. So their games just look hopeless.
They did. I think they got a Herald, and I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. They got a Herald and a Dragon.
Yeah, there was this one game.
But they didn't get any kills.
They've obviously just been cursed monkey pot again. Because they just went to the cursed monkey pot and they said, we just want to play a ton of perfect games.
And they didn't even get a Herald. They got a Dragon. But yeah, it was
the one with the lost. Is it the one with the mid towers thing? With the lost mid towers for Dragon?
Yeah, it was the game against Dignitas that was. I mean, it was pretty bad. And then. Yeah, I mean it's tough.
I've got a joke for you, Monty. Right, Kenvi. The reason I know he's in deep shit, Monty, is because his surname literally is Espinoza. Right, his surname is Espinoza, Monty. So that means he can't even pray to God because he believes there is a force that could represent God, but it doesn't have a personal identity or anything. It's a very self-indulgent joke. I knew you'd be the only person who'd appreciate it. Sorry, it's all good. It's all good. Look it up, kids. Do your homework.
Look up your philosophy. But yeah, that's actually really funny. But yeah, I mean they did almost get perfect game by Dignitas.
Even by Golden Guardians, we can watch the game right now.
By 100 Thieves. The Golden Guardians game.
They got one Dragon and one kill at.
They got one Dragon, one Herald. That's the one I was thinking of. So yeah, they do almost get perfect game like multiple times. The bad thing about that Immortals game, so they did. So it was almost worse than being perfect gamed. We were doing like a live viewing of that on this channel, Amazing and I. And like the crazy thing about that game in particular was that they got objectives, but they traded down for those objectives. Like they got Herald, but then they lost like 1,000 gold other places on the map. So they actually would have just been better off not doing the Herald. So the hilarious thing is like technically they didn't get perfect game, but somehow it was even worse than a perfect game because they just dug themselves into a deeper hole by not getting perfect gamed. It was pretty crazy to watch.
Yes, I remember. I'm watching it right now on my second monitor. That IMT Spalin moves up to the Herald, and then you look at the gold difference before Herald. It's like 700 gold for Golden Guardians, and then 1 minute later, it's 1.8k gold.
Yes,
Giovanni gets like 3 plates bot tower.
Yes,
and it's up 1,000 gold, and you're just like, and then you look at how the Herald was used this game. Kenvi has it, and he puts it. Let's see here where he puts the Herald. What does he use the Herald? Does he even use the Herald this game? He puts it top, and it gets 2 plates.
Yep. And so they got 320 gold, but they lost 1,000 gold. It was pretty funny.
The gold went to Trundle, right? And you're just like, what the fuck is he gonna do with that with his fucking gold, right? So it's definitely disappointing to see that kind of stuff. And it's a very common theme that teams overreact for Herald. One of LS's biggest gripes is that he hated Herald. He just really hated Herald. It was one of the few things that really made his gears grind, or whatever you say, is that he just couldn't handle when teams that were outscaling would go to Herald and fight and lose the whole game over it.
Yep.
It was really interesting that he had some things he just cared so much about. Things like items, runes, builds, heralds, freezing on side lane in mid game, not fighting objectives you don't have to fight if you outscale, and drafts. Those are some of the things that he cared a lot about, which was very interesting because in the past with coaches like Reaper or Mithy, things like builds or runes were never a concern. Unless someone had like a blatantly troll build like Power Evil having his Conqueror Riftmaker thing going on in Oriana, right? Then sure they will ask, what's this all about, right? But besides that, they never cared. But Ellis put a lot of effort into thinking about, cookies is one of his big things, and runes and item builds, and making people think more about their choices instead of just autopiloting to the most comfortable thing and the most normal thing, so to speak. So it was interesting to see him in action for a while, because I was there watching from the sidelines for the most part. I wasn't playing more than 1, sometimes 2 games of scrims a week. And most of the time I would just be watching DLCS scrims, right? And watching him do his thing. So it was
I like that. Especially because the cool thing to me there is like that's a good reason to be a coach. You have like these set principles you think nobody does generally, and you want to inculcate them into people and see if they have an effect. Like, I'll give you an example. What he says about Herald is basically one of my biggest pet peeves ever watching League of Legends. Because since I come from CSGO, right, I've always been trying to look at what's the basic strategy that each team thinks they have to win in this scenario. And I can't believe how many games of League of Legends I've watched where the team that is like ahead with a scaling comp, they're ahead in the game with a scaling comp, just fights a Baron fight and just loses it. And it's like loses the game off it. Like, what? Why are we even fighting this? Like, it's one thing to bait it and make them fight you in a favourable fight, or to bait it and then just make sure no one can take it, or check if they're doing it. But when they just do it, no reason, because in their brain they're just going like, but we're ahead and we've got the scaling. If we had Baron as well, it's like that. But that like cost balance it's off, isn't it? Like what you lose if you throw it's just not worth it. So in general, I can't believe I've even seen like the amount of Korean teams I've even seen do that. Dude, it's crazy. So that's one of the things. If I was coach, that would be like one of my main things I'd fucking love to drill. So I can see why he goes in on that stuff, because if you can really get all those habits in place, like this is what people don't get about coaching, dude, is all those stories you hear. NA, it's notorious of coaches like, well, what can I do? They don't let bloody coaches do anything. I can't implement anything. Then don't take the job, because at the end of it, right, when you get fired, everyone is going to judge you as if you chose everything, as though you chose every draft, you chose how they practice, the team, the players. So if you ever go into that role, get every single fucking squeeze every last drop out of that motherfucker. Do everything you want to do, because that way if you lose, at least it was you. At least you made the choices. Who the fuck wants to be blamed that it wasn't even you who made all the decisions? Like, I'd want to do that. I'd like take all the weight on me.
It cuts both ways too, though, because I think what's the reverse anger that I feel to that situation is the anger I feel when I watched Team Liquid play 100 Thieves this last week, right? So they pick the Udyr with a pushing bot lane, and Flyquest showed earlier this season what you do is you use the Udyr and the pressure you have in bot to take a 6-minute dragon, right? And then you just massively prioritize Dragon Soul. And so to watch Team Liquid just fart around, because like Team Liquid, the way they've been winning is not through like playing early game super well. They play pretty passively and then wait to outscale their opponent. But they're coming in with this Udyr and this Kalista in this game, and like I'm watching them. So there's one point in this game where they push out bot lane and they've taken the dragon, and they have an opportunity to just swap Kalista and Renata to take Herald at around 8 minutes around Herald spawn as well, and they just walk back into bot lane. I'm like, do you guys not understand that you have to push the advantages that you have right now with this composition to snowball the game and snowball these objectives? And they're like, nah, we're just going to go back into bot lane for literally no reason and just sit there and do nothing, and then lose Herald. And then when it comes to these later like Dragon 3-4 fights as well, they're just not playing aggressively around the objective with their composition, and they just kind of get smashed by 100 Thieves. So it's really puzzling to watch teams' decisions as to not knowing when they really have to push the gas pedal as well into accelerating these games. And I thought Team Liquid had a pretty clear win condition in that game that they just totally ignored.
Yeah, I'm looking at the game right now, and there's a timer at 7 minutes where Ornn uses ult top, and TL has GP ult, they could probably try to swap in this time and force the Herald. But they use GP ult for a play bot where they don't get anything. They get a flash from Aphelios, and then they lose the Herald right after Wukong started. They do have Corki mid, and fighting Herald with Corki before 10 minutes is kind of hard, and Ornn is kind of strong since GP has no ult. So I think the Herald give might be fair enough, because swapping against Aphelios is kind of risky sometimes if you have on GP ult, which they use for a play, right? If that play works, which it could have, Core J hit his Q, it could have been okay. But
I think they can. I think they can do it because it was an Ori in mid, and the big ults were down at that time too. I think Abbadage's Shockwave was also down at that time, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he does use it at. Yeah, he uses it right before the Herald started actually for
right. So they didn't have Ornn ult or Ori ult, and they had a timing to swap top. So that's why I was like, "What are you guys doing?" Right?
Yeah.
So
it was timer at 8:20 where Hansama and Core J base first, and once blind has a base, they could run to the Herald right here and just do it. And I think they would win that fight. They did use GP ult and Coast ult for a fight on both sides. Maybe what's making them not go for it. And Thorin has full bot camps alive, but I do agree that the whole game shouldn't have that kind of pace, where the game should never be, like, TL shouldn't allow the game to be so slow. I guess they thought they would maybe scale with the Corki and the GP, but they gave up both Heralds. They get first 2 dragons. And
but here's my problem. If you think that that's true, then with this composition, maybe don't pick Udyr.
Or Kalista. I mean, from what I'm seeing here, they get first 2 dragons, and the 3rd dragon, they just let them flip it, which I think they shouldn't be.
No.
TL should be able to.
There was also just really weird decisions that were made. So like Bjergsen went for an early Hex Drinker instead of like rushing his Ludens, and he needed the Ludens power spike so that they could actually contest the early dragons and play around Kalista strengths. There's a lot of weird shit happening that game. And, if you compare it to the game you played Udyr in, because it's not that Udyr always has to go for these early dragons, it's just in the Flyquest game that happened earlier this season, and in this particular game, if you have the bot lane pressure, you can play for very early dragons because of Udyr's strength and soloing them super early on into the game. And you can basically just force early game, very favorable early game scenarios at like 24 minutes for your soul, right? But when you guys play it, it made sense to play more passively because you had this Yuumi that was basically allowing the Udyr just to run at their back line for free in your game. So it's a different win condition with the same champion based on the composition. But you guys played out, you guys just kind of farmed it up with the Udyr, and it made sense. My point is, like, Team Liquid is playing this style that doesn't necessarily mesh with the composition, and they're so passive that it really doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, in our game, we actually made some mistakes as well. We told Blabber we thought we could push in the bot lane, but we actually couldn't. Still just bot lane and play very aggressive, took a lot of damage, and they had to push. So they actually got bot crap, and they got a blue buff, I think, from Blabber, and then Contax pathed back to top lane. He got double crabs and a full clear again, and he was so far ahead. But in that game, if we just path opposite, which should have in hindsight, we would actually play for scaling. Udyr is like so unkillable by champs like Senna that don't have high DPS. Because nowadays you can't buy Kraken Slayer anymore, and so then you don't have enough gold. So you have to buy like this lethality build that just can't kill a tank. So they had this pick. They picked Zoe. So they have Zoe, Yone, and Senna. Very low damage to a tank with an enchant on it. So we just knew that if we don't lose the whole game in 15 minutes, we will just auto win teamfights with Siri, Yuumi, Udyr, and we will just run them over, and we did. So yeah, I think sometimes you can draft for late game with Udyr, and sometimes you can draft for early game. But in TL's game, they're playing against Ornn, Orianna, Aphelios, and Wukong. So that's not enough damage to kill an Udyr in this game. I think TL's biggest mistakes is probably just not fighting the 3rd dragon till the absolute death, or the 4th one. Let's see what happens here to get the 4th one. When is the soul spawning? Here. Month 1 banger. I mean, the bigger problem is that TL is at man 26 against Orianna, Aphelios, Lulu, Ornn, and they're up 0.7k gold, and it's Cloud Soul. They just don't have enough gold lead to actually win this game, given how useless Renata is in this game and how bad Kalista is against all these champs. They picked an early game comp and they just can't win. Yeah, but, I mean, they have to force harder,
Right, so that's what I'm saying. It's like there's I don't think it's really like my point of all of this conversation is like I don't think it's really an issue of you shouldn't force Herald. It's like not knowing your comp's win conditions and not like aggressively playing to them, or just leaving things alone that don't matter to you. And it just seems like that mistake is like kind of constantly made. And I don't know what's going on in LCS with like Lucian, but I watch other regions and Lucian is fucking good. And I watch LCS and Lucian Nami is just terrible because people don't play aggressively enough in lane. Like they don't take the same level of like all ins with confidence that we see in other lanes. Like, there isn't a universe where Immortals should be losing to like Zeri Lulu with Lucian Nami. Like they got destroyed immediately and then couldn't do anything for the rest of the game. And if you're not actively pushing that advantage, you're missing out on the point of running these compositions, which I find very weird. Has somebody, so here's, when it comes to Lucian, who has been doing well with Lucian in scrims? Because clearly everybody in LCS thinks like, this is the tits, man. Like they want to go after it, but everybody just fails with it. So what the fuck has been going on in scrims?
FBI? Who is it? Who plays it?
I will say that last week we were doing very well with Lucian Nami, and then this week we tried it again, and it felt a lot worse because it got nerfed on this patch. And I think that's true. You can't play as Lucian with a lot of things and go like sort of even, but you're pushed in a lot of time and you're not having any control of the laning phase. So there's that. But I think that it's maybe the newest NA Jace or the newest, NA something that has a win lane type of champ. I do feel that Lucian Nami is a little bit of a bait sometimes. It doesn't really win lane as hard as it used to at Worlds or earlier this year. So I think that things like the MF Yumi that EG played can lane against Lucian Nami. I think me and Vulcan even played that at Worlds. We played that matchup at Worlds against Rogue. And I think that MF Yumi can actually lane and do fine. And then you outscale in a lot of ways because Lucian Nami isn't that good against a lot of things. But Yumi is just an OP character, right? So yeah, I think Lucian Nami might be a little bit of a bait for any teams, especially in the lower tier teams. I think that if I was playing a team like IMT who played Lucian Nami this week, I wouldn't be that hyped to play a champ like that. Same thing goes for things like Kalista. I think that Kalista should be played by good teams with strong AD carries, strong bot lanes that can snowball the game and win. I think playing, Lucian and Kalista type champs in bad teams is not good enough. You won't win with a lead anyways. So, yeah.
I'm curious. One, this podcast would work on 0.5 YouTube speed between the three of us, or ketamine. One of the
my
two.
bad.
Well, we all do it. People say the same thing
I
about me and my videos. People say they watch them on like 2 times speed or whatever. Like, what I want to ask is this about TL though. What do you think the flaw of TL is? Because the problem I have with that team is basically, I've had the whole of last split, and now I've got this period. The lineup's just never, like, on paper it looks amazing, mate. It looks like it should just win NA hands down easily. It never seems like it actually works in the game.
I do think TL has historically, not just this roster, had a problem when CoreJ isn't playing a champ with direct agency, either winning lane hard or a champ that can do something. He's much better. His team is a lot better when he's playing melee champs that can engage and facilitate. When he's playing champs like Nata, it doesn't look the same unless he wins lane really hard, because their mid jungle is mostly just playing tanks and scaling. And Whippo also seems to be doing a lot better when he's playing a champ that can actually like do something, not a GP type champion, some sort of like Ornn, Gragas, Aatrox type of champion. Whether they're meta or not isn't that important. Like, you see fucking Wonders making magic happen with Gragas all the time. I think that will benefit, TL. I thought last split when people was playing like Renekton and Gragas, he was making magic happen everywhere in the whole game.
Sure, yeah.
I think that facilitates Hans Sama and Bjergsen, who are like, I wouldn't say passive players. Hans Sama's a good laner, but they don't play champs right now that do something in the game. So they're playing most control mages, which I think is the meta in mid lane, Corki control mages, right? And someone has to start fight. But in these games, Gangplank, Corki, Udyr, who's gonna start a fight? It's just there's nothing there. So I think that's what they need right now is CoreJ or Whippo to play more facilitating champions that can actually start a fight and do something. Tanks, for example. And I think that's their biggest issue. They are still 5-3. 5-2, I believe. So they aren't doing that badly. They're just not doing that well either.
Well, if you use the eye test, like they should have lost both games last week.
Yes, to Flyquest, yeah, sure.
And they like caught a throw, And then it's also some of their wins have been a little shaky. And then when they lose, they just they got completely rolled by 100 Thieves, despite having the advantages we talked about. And it's weird because you look at, I'm curious what your thoughts on Hansama are, because he's been surprisingly weak, I think, since joining this roster. And if I would have thought, okay, we got a Callista, maybe some Pocket Draven picks coming around, like seems pretty good around the world. This should be like the Hansama meta, and it just isn't. It just fucking isn't. So
all the champs that he's good at are meta. Lucian Nami was something he was good at. Callista was one of his best champions. Draven, Senna, like all these champs are his best champions. So it should be his meta for sure. And Cody should be on paper best support next to Vulcan. So it's weird that they aren't having more success in bot recently. I think that some games like against TSM, they pick this like ego matchups, like they picked Ezreal Bard against Callista Renata, and you just don't win at any level. And it felt like they were kind of like egoing a little bit on their opponents, like saying, "Yeah, TSM fucking dog shit. We can play, Callista. We can play this matchup, even though it's really bad for us because we're better." And then they got rolled and died in lane multiple times, and Hansama got caught multiple times against Flyquest. He died in lane 1v1. He died mid game 1-3 times, I think, that I can remember in my head right now. So he's been having a pretty bad split overall. I think in spring he was decent, but I paid less attention in spring because I wasn't playing. Now I'm watching games more closely and paying more attention to how people are playing and stuff. But yeah, I do think he's been very underwhelming given how good he was at Worlds and how much he was praised at Worlds.
This is just the cycle of Hansama, mate, though, because I've seen this. It's happened at 2 Worlds now. There was obviously the Season 7 one I referred to earlier, the Misfits SKT one, and then now there was the Rogue one, where because Rogue looked a bit dodgy, like he got to look super good. Here's the cycle that Hansama goes through. He is the player where he's always the most underrated, like, oh, he's the hipster pick. Like, I think he's like secretly the best. So then he's underrated. But then the problem is, so many people eventually say he's underrated that he becomes overrated because then he's just the best, isn't he? And he's never been like just a permanent best, like 2 years in a row. Like, wow, mind blowing ADC. He's just a really good ADC, but he's not like some fucking, he's not faker, is he? Come on.
It's hard to say because Rogue bot lane was by far the best duo in lane. EU for a long time. They were really good in lane. Everyone said Rogue bot lane best in lane. They're super good in lane. They play Morgana Kaylin, they play Callista, they play all this kind of stuff, and they're super good. Hard to play against Draven, everything. And then they go to Worlds, and Trimby was playing really poorly, I think, in lane. He was dying in almost every single game in lane. And Hansama was maintaining the 0-0x KDA where he's not dying, he's not losing the game for his team. He's making some plays here and there, like a solo kill on Ghost, I remember that one. Picks off Khan on cycling one time. He's doing some plays here and there, and overall, solid performance, right? And then he goes to NA in a really good team, stack team, super team, so to speak. And he's not doing anywhere near as good as he was before. And Trimpy is still doing well in EU, in Rogue. So it's a bit hard to tell what's going wrong for Hansama, but
yeah, but here's what kills me, dude. I think the bot lanes, look, no offense to you, but I think the bot lanes in NA are pretty fucking weak.
I actually don't think so, but more on that later, because I think that when I came to NA and TSM in 2018, I also didn't play anywhere near as good as I did in EU. So it's possible that he has problems adjusting. Like he has no friends here, which I didn't have when I came here. He doesn't have any like social life outside of scrims, which hurt me and Mithy, for example, because some people really rely on having social, friends or like activities outside of scrims. It's like people like Mithy and Amazing need that to perform. I don't personally that much, but it helps, right? So that could be something that's going wrong with him. Like maybe he doesn't have. Maybe he just isn't happy in his team for whatever reason, right? Sometimes teams don't mesh personally. It happened to C9 last year. Our biggest enemy was ourselves. I got benched because of personal problems between players, and that might be solved now between the people that were involved back then. But it hurt us as a team, at that moment. So it's hard to always know the full story to a team like this. I do think Hansama, straight up, the eye test is not playing as well as he was last year in summer and in at Worlds. So something is going wrong for sure. But about the bot lanes in NA, I do think that the top bot lanes are actually pretty decent right now compared to historically. I think that FBI Hui, solid, in lane phase especially. Koji and Hansama should be good on paper. Not playing well right now, but they're good players still, right? Vulcan and Danny, Springs with champions. Vulcan is the best support in the league right now, or it's the best performing support player by far. It's not even close, in my opinion. Danny is solid. Has some champion pool issues. Like you will never see EG playing Callista or Lucian, probably, in this whole split. But they find ways around it, so Danny can play MF. Or he played Seraphine this week. He did well on that, I think, sort of. So EG ball best in the league. I think me and Berserker, we're trailing behind. But once we get there, we'll be a strong duo. And I think that the overall level, there's like 4 good duos this year. Whereas in the past, I always thought like,
Oh, you mean historic, right? Okay.
yeah,
sure.
there's like double lift, Core J.
Yeah.
DK and Sazel aren't bad, but they're not like good either. There's me and Mithy and me and Smoothie. You know, like it wasn't that great back then. So I think nowadays duos are pretty good in NA.
Sure.
And even at Worlds, I thought like FBI and Hui played decently well at Worlds. I think that they held their own against, 2 of the premier ball in the world in T1's and EG's ball lanes. So I think.
What about this then? Since you were talking about the TSM game, even though we were memeing before, let's for real talk about TSM because, dude, here's the thing. Last split, like I didn't know some of those players, but once I saw them play, I was like, yeah, this is going to be terrible. It just looks like a totally bad lineup they've done. Yeah. This lineup doesn't even make sense at this bad, mate. Like if you even just tell me these 3 names, it's got Hooney, Speaker, Maple, take whoever you want as the bot lane. Like they're going to at least be a playoff team, right? What the fuck's going on?
Yeah, TSM should be playoff for sure. I think that Mia is someone that played in LAN last split. He was playing Champs Queue. And I was actually very impressed with him. I thought that he was, a lot better than the average LAN team player. And I thought that this guy was in time, could be really good. So I'm happy they took a chance on him specifically. I think that Maple, I don't have to speak for Maple, right? He's proven he's a very, very good player. I think that his biggest obstacle will be, learn language and the culture. It's hard to go from east to west, I think, as a player.
That's a bit weird. I didn't even thought of that angle. You played this motherfucker at Season 5 Worlds.
Yeah, I played this guy. I played this guy many years.
LTS.
Yeah, I played him at World Season 5, at IEM Season 6, at some other thing later on, and he's a great player, a lot of experience, and I think that he's a player that does something. He's not traditionally been a player that sits back and lets his team lose, right? So I think that he can bring something to the TSM.
He's engineered a lot of upsets against world-class teams, right?
Yeah. That's also why you would think this team would be good, like Speaker and fucking Maple. That should be like the new Caster of Maple, like fucking go ham, play mid-jungle.
Yeah, look at some of the games right now. Who'd they play again?
I mean, this week they
played all the
lost
games?
the EG and Dignitas.
Yeah.
So
yeah, Dignitas, not a good look. What even happened in that game? Yeah, I didn't watch this game, I think. Maybe it was right after our game, so I was busy with interviews. Oh, I remember this game. I mean, I personally think that TSM is kind of in the category right now of playing the harder team comp. They have like this Renata Calista thing against Siri Yumi, and
I mean, Blue's had some pop off games on his ear as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. He's been playing a lot better than I thought he was. But it looks to me like TSM. Oh wait, what happens here? They throw the whole game for up. Oh, what is Tactical doing?
That's the
question I'd like to ask.
That's the real story, right?
That's a logical question I would genuinely like to ask those.
Oh, but they lost the whole game for Ripoff.
What do you generally think of Tacticals in ADC, by the way? Obviously, he's been different levels of teams now. What do you think of him at the moment?
It sounds a bit like a Reddit narrative to say like he's hit or miss or like coin flip, but oh my god, who needs it? Okay, so I think
I love this Zven React stream.
I'm watching TSM right now, and this game is such a mess. Like, okay, so first Tactical. I think he's a pretty good mechanical player, but he's a bit too what we call an ego player. Like he will do things where you're like, what the fuck is he doing? Like you can never win this fight, or you can never do this play, and he gets caught like unironically a fair amount and dies for no reason sometimes. Even in Champions Queue, if I'm playing with him in Champions Queue and he dies for no reason, he's like, oh, I did Tactical, guys. I'm like,
holy shit! He's memeing on himself using his own name as the.
That's a bit of a problem, but I do think that when he was in TL with Core J, he was playing really well, and it wasn't because of Core J. So I know he has it in him to play well, but I'm watching this game right now. TSM has 2 dragons at min 13. They're up 1.5k gold, and they're on course to get soul at 25 minutes, which is good. And then they just lose the whole game for a red buff because Tactical wants to hit it, but then he just dies. And then Pika dies trying to help him, and then Huni gets barreled into tower and just dies, and they lose a 1,500 gold lead in 1 minute. And they're playing against Asir, Gragas, Yumi, Siri. So they just played a comp that wins early game. They won early game, made one mistake, and lost the whole game. And now it's just over. That's just it. But this is why I said that I don't like when some teams play the early game comp, because you make one bad mistake and it's over. You're playing against Siri, Yumi, Asir. it's very extreme in this case that Yumi Syria series a mega scaling comp.
Right.
And Costa is like the opposite. They also have Nar and Viego who can't do anything if you're not winning. So, but it's a case of like a bad team should be careful playing a comp that doesn't scale at all. They have Corki in their comp, but that's the only champ that does anything later in the game. And Corki can't carry a tank.
I would even argue there's another area where League as a game has fundamentally changed, like how the win conditions work, right? Back in the day, if you super stomp the early game in lane, you can just win the whole game. It's the end of the game. You have to... There's a certain pace to the game now because you have to use the mechanics Riot's made of the fucking dragons and the herald, etc., to end the game. Like you're not just going to kill people and be ahead and it's over. Like that rarely ever happens.
There was this common thing Ellis would say. He would ask the players after a scrim game, how much gold do you think this team needs to be ahead to win this game against this comp? And they'll be like, 5k gold, 10k gold, blah, blah. And there will often be his reason. So you think that they have to be ahead 5k gold at this time to win the game? And they're like, yes. So why the fuck are you fighting Herald? He would be like, and they're like, that makes sense, But Summit was...
I like the way he baited him into that as well. He did like the classic
stuff.
It's like, oh, why would you do that, you idiot? Like, oh,
it's like a children's teaching kind of thing, right?
I love it. He had the trap card the whole time, Yu-Gi-Oh style. Very much in the LS wheel.
He really did, yeah. And Summit was always under the impression that he wanted to play Gnar and Necton and fight Herald, fuck yeah. But then someone also agreed that if he just played something else and outscaled, they would just win. He's like, yeah, that's true.
I like the way he's doing it. He's now on some like fucking that little kid in the fucking Matrix movie, like, there is no spoon. LS is on some like trying to like fucking blow people's minds. Like but Summit, you don't even have to fight to win.
Yeah. I mean, LS has had I love it. Very funny and interesting things that just really pissed him off. Like if Winsome would buy 2 pink wards on Sona instead of buying 1 or 0, he would just get mad. And then he kept doing it, and one day he was fucking slam the table and say, "Look, you have fucking Moonstone at minute." It's the first game of the split last year.
Oh, because he'll want you to rush the Moonstone. Of course, that build, of course.
Win some Sona.
Yes.
Maybe it's here. I can't remember it, man.
No, I know he's someone who thinks you should complete the Moonstaff or whatever, as soon as possible.
It's right here. Yeah. It's the first game against Golden Guardians, and he has Moonstone at... Cena has 3 dragons at 20 minutes, and Soul's coming up, and he doesn't have Moonstone 1 minute before Soul spawns.
Perfect.
And then meanwhile, he buys 2 pinks per base, right? Puts it in a spot where it gets killed in 1 minute, and then Ella's like, "Look, the fucking pink board, it's fucking useless, right?" So that's the kind of things that other coaches will never look at. So that was interesting to work with, and I really like that he pointed out individual things a lot, like freezing a side lane. And I think that this whole Summit freezing side lanes in mid game was a really big obstacle for C9's main team. Like I would often watch reviews go on for like 15 minutes about one single point a game, and then sometimes else would whip out this drawing tool, and you're like, "Oh shit, here we go again."
As soon as the drawing tool comes out,
drawing tools,
taking the belt off.
Oh no, the fucking pencil's coming out, boys. Let's go.
There you go.
And I remember, like, I
also appreciate the fact LS as a coach believes in freezing. In the bloody VOD review, he's like, "No, we're going to stay on this moment for like 10 minutes."
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then we're watching
the concept of freezing in the VOD review. You can't.
The best part was like I was watching from Academy room, right? I was helping them scrim as well, and then someone's like, "Guys, look at LS, the drawing tool," and there's like lines everywhere on screen saying "freeze here" and "push this wave" and 530, blah blah blah. You're like. It was a good time.
I appreciate. We have a saying in English. I don't know how you say it in Danish. In English, if you wish you could like see what was going on in a scenario, you say, "I wish I was a fly on the wall," because you wish you could like stop. The joke is you were just like fucking peeking around the corner from some like Academy. Like, what the fuck? I would as well if it was LS.
It's also really funny because like in the
like a reality TV series
in the Cloud9 house, by the way. So like they do VOD reviews in the living room, and there's like this big like couch area, and then immediately next to the living room there are like these like folding doors, and it's the Academy room. So then you could like open up the doors and just watch the review that's going on.
Academy has since moved upstairs, but it is true that was the case before. So, but as much as it sounds really good with LS and all that, there also was a lot of problems with LS and the staff and all that I came to. But it was like there was a lot of drama in the org, and it's just not worth it.
You sort of vibed with some of his methods and his philosophy.
But what you said about the fly on the wall, it was good content for sure. So, it was definitely pay-per-view type of content, and it's what it is. But I think that Els was a very interesting person to work with, and I liked it a lot. I liked seeing a different perspective on coaching. So coaches are always like about communication and teamwork and all being on the same page and doing the same thing, follow the calls, like that kind of stuff, and draft. And Ellis was just so much more individual.
Why you buy that fucking pink ward? I told you to finish the moon stuff.
Yeah, like literally slam the fucking table, old times for pink wards,
Exactly.
But considering that you still have Max Waldo as the head coach, he was in Korea with LS, like he's very much like cut from the LS cloth, right? So how much different is it with Max as the head coach instead of LS?
Max is definitely very different than LS. He's despite them being good friends and all that, and some people call Max the LS disciple and all that. Max is very, very logical as a person. He just how do I say it? Think about this. How do I phrase this better so it makes a lot more sense? He really.
Well, you're thinking. All I would say is, if I had to pick which one of the disciples, maybe Judas. Keep going.
I'm not sure what that means.
It's biblical references. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
I remember when people called me and Mithy Judas when we left Origin. The whole G2 Origin drama thing, and the fans calling us Judas. It was.
All I'm going to say on that one is
a little bit of
I think you dodged a bullet by getting out of that team. If you saw that team went after that, I think you probably made the right choice. Made the right choice.
You think so? I mean, I'm still not that happy about how that happened, but that's a story for another day.
Yeah, of course.
Sure, of
course.
I think that Max is a good coach that tries hard to make everyone happy. I think he could be better in some ways. I think that Max is a good coach at League. He coaches the game well, but he isn't as good at the human aspect. Sometimes teams genuinely just lose to themselves because players just can't work together. They have personal disputes, or they have someone is tilting in scrims, and one guy hates it, but one guy doesn't want to say it to that guy, or one guy passive aggressive or something like that, right? Max isn't that good at handling that kind of stuff, so he's very good at a team where the personalities are very liked, so to speak. But if he's in a team with personalities that have a lot of things to say and a lot of ego, so to speak, Max isn't as good at that. But he's getting better at it, so I'm happy about that.
He's also very young, so
yes, he's not as assertive, I guess. He's not as dominant. Yeah. Whereas LS was very good at putting his foot in the ground and slamming the tables, literally, and making sure people actually hear him, right? So I think both can be good, different times, different teams, and I think the biggest part about coaching is that different teams need different coaches. Some teams need a coach like Youngbuck that can just facilitate and ask questions and help the players reach conclusions, whereas some teams need someone to actually coach them and teach them how to play the fucking game, right? So good teams generally don't need a coach to actually coach them, right? They need someone to give advice and help them facilitate and reach the right conclusions on their own, and then just maintain the team.
I can only imagine, because it sounds like such a mismatch. Fucking Summit and Max Waldo trying to work together, because Summit's like that fucking Chad meme, isn't he? It's like the crying face meme. No, Summit, what? You really going to pick that, even though it only wins lane and doesn't work in the comp and will die? And he's just like, yes. It's like that's just fucking him, isn't it?
Summit needed someone to yell at him, right?
I know he did.
Yeah, and that's why Ellis was good with Summit, but at the same time, some people need different coaches, so it's just it can just sometimes not work out. That's why I thought that when I was in G2. I actually liked Youngbuck a lot because he was just not trying to overstep his boundaries. He knew Mithy, Sven, all these guys are better players than I were, and they know more about the game than I do. So I'll learn from them, and I'll help facilitate. I'll ask them questions in review. I'll do some drafts and ask them what they think about it, and I'll take feedback and learn from it. And at the end of my time in G2, I thought Joey was a fucking good coach. And then when he joined Fnatic, he was like, people there loved him. They said Joey's the best coach I ever had. He's fucking insane, And I was fucking happy on his behalf, right? So I think different teams, in Fnatic, Joey was coaching them and teaching them how to play the game. What I've been told, at least, he was helping a lot more in that regard. Whereas in our team, he was doing managing, he was cooking for us, he was doing a lot of things on the side while just helping us. So, different team, different coaches.
Let's talk about EG a little bit, because they are the reigning champion. They're coming in off of, a performance at MSI that you might expect from a team with some younger players. I don't think people had a lot of hopes, but they made top 4, which I think is just good enough and got some valuable experience. Mm-hmm. They've had some pretty dominant games coming into this split so far. I know at least at the end of last split, the kind of common consensus was that they were dominating a lot of the scrims in North America and they were seen as a very dangerous team. So how's your opinion of Evil Geniuses changed? Because this split should be more competitive. Like Team Liquid underperformed, C9 imploded due to coaching / summit issues, and you guys are running it back with what appears to be a much stronger roster on paper now that you're back in. Fudge is back in top, Jensen's in. So we anticipate that this is going to be a much harder title for EG to win. So what are your initial thoughts of them so far?
I have always had the opinion that if you go to MSI and your team doesn't mental boom and implode afterwards, you will always come back and be the best team in summer. There's just no way you don't do this. Unless there's like burnout or personal issues, you will always be the best team. So that's it, right? I think that
because of the practice that you get.
Yes, you practice against the best teams in the world for a whole month straight. You play on stage, you get experience, you get to just play the game, and other teams don't. So that's the advantage. So I expect EG to be the best for a while. We had a slow start because of our whole bootcamp problems, passport issue, blah, blah. That's like our copium right now, that we're not the best team in the league. But I don't know what's going on with Team Liquid specifically. They are lucky to be 5-2. That's fair to say. Their Flyquest game should have been lost, and they haven't played well in some of the other games. I think 100 Thieves is kind of going back to their old, like, Philios, Oriana, Tank Top, Ornn, some of these Ornns. Like, it's almost iconic. Suddenly playing Ornn and then playing like this hyper carry mage comp that just does nothing in scales and you just automatically win late game. It's also how they beat us in summer last year, I believe. They were playing this scaling comp with Oriana, Philios, and we were playing like TF Varus, right? And we were ahead the whole game. Then Perks get caught, I get caught, and the game is lost, right? So 100 Thieves is looking stronger because they know what they're good at and what they aren't good at, and they're playing that style and they're winning with it. Whereas TL seems to be unable to figure out what their identity is, sort of having like an identity crisis. And then EG is just, they know exactly what they're good at, they know the weaknesses, they avoid them by banning champions like Kalista and Lucian sometimes, playing different champs for Danny, like MF, that he's actually really good at. And then they're just really fucking solid, and they're the best team that made it to MSI, got practice, and got even better. So EG is just by far the best team, with 100 Thieves a little bit below them, and then it's like Liquid is somewhere there. And I also think Flyquest is doing pretty well. They should have beat Liquid, like I said earlier, and they beat us. And I think that me and Berserker played really bad that game, but they still played well afterwards.
Here's the takeaway. Like, you guys gave up kills in the laning phase, right? But they snowballed those kills really well into a win. Like, it was a very smooth snowball from them into like forcing very quick dragon stacks.
Yes.
Then you had to give up like the soul point, which then forced this like apocalyptic fight around the soul itself.
Yeah.
So they did a really good job of controlling the pace of the game. And like, for me, that's what was really lacking last split, was I would watch EG die in lane, and then the team that killed them wouldn't do anything, and then just eventually lose, right?
Yes.
And so I like seeing that teams are taking the punishment. Like, if they get that kill, they can like push that punishment really hard. And I think Flyquest did a really good job of doing that.
Yeah, I will say our comp was not very forgiving. Like, we have Fiora top, we have Yasuo Gragas as our only playmaking. So if we're behind, they just need to tell themselves, guys, Yasuo is here. That's the only place that can make a play, is where he is, right? Because Gragas doesn't work without Yasuo, kind of. So once we fall behind, Braum can just stand in front of Gragas, and no one can do anything about it. So it felt like we were staring down this inevitable soul that we couldn't fight, because we have Fiora, and I'm fucking useless on Lulu if I lose lane to Braum, right? So I think they did well, considering, once they got that lead, we couldn't do anything to win. We had so little opportunities to fight that game. We couldn't win any fights.
You didn't have a lot of agency, right?
I mean, they have like a comp with, a Braum and shit, double carry comp, and we could never reach that carries with Gragas Yasuo. Couldn't win. We tried making plays in the Jason side lane. We got him once, but I died for it. I think Flyquest has been playing fairly well. Their throw against Team Liquid was really, really bad, though.
Yeah.
So they aren't super clean with it, but they did play well against us. So I think Flyquest shouldn't be underestimated too much. I think they can make some magic happen. But yeah, I think the top teams is pretty clear right now for the most part. Like, EG's way ahead of everyone. Then it's 100 Thieves right now. Maybe us, we beat them, right? And then it's definitely like TL somewhere up there. And top Top
The only
four.
thing is, though, I've got a
very clear.
question for you. Here's my question. In light of what you said about 100 Thieves, because I get what you mean. Like this last week, they just went to like everything that used to work for them, basically, and it did
Yes.
work again. Like it was absolutely paint by numbers, and they knew exactly what they were doing, how to pilot that comp. The question I would have is this: obviously, the eternal dilemma whenever you're in LCS is: do I want to win these next two BO1s, or do I want to get better fundamentally at League of Legends? The only problem I would have with that basically is: look, it's great to get the wins and keep your position and go in the playoffs and actually beat people and get confidence. But at some point in time, 100 Thieves has to address some of these major issues they have as a team, right? Like that lineup's been together ages now, mate, and they still have so many problems in the late and mid game.
Yeah, one thing that was really common back when I was in G2 was that we would always say, with this draft, we can beat HK or Fnatic. And then someone would say, but we can't beat SKT. And someone was like, yeah, we can. So why are we playing it? It's actually a good draft. It's a draft we can win with. And at some point, we started figuring out that we care more about winning worlds, even though back then it was big copium, but it was our dreams back, right? So we started drafting to beat SKT. That was the team that beat us last at MSI. And I thought that was a good way of thinking about it, that drafting Ornn, Orianna, Aphelios, excuse me, will win you LCS. One of Thieves did it before, and they'll do it again, and they'll keep doing it this week against Team Liquid, you saw. But I don't think that's a good draft meta. I don't think Aphelios, Orianna... Yeah, I don't think Aphelios, Orianna, Ornn should be able to win a game against GP. They shouldn't be able to, right? It should be too hard to win against them. But they did, because NA is not good enough to punish those China champions. Now, you can say what you want about... Maybe the meta is playing slow, and that is the best way to play, but I don't think so right now. And it is true that Reaper always said it's better to just play what you're good at than try to be someone you're not for wins. And it is true. There's a fine balance between playing for wins and playing for improvement.
Yes.
But you're in summer split at this point. You need wins to go to playoffs and to go have first and second seed. And yeah, it's a hard balance to find. But Reaper always said, in NA, just play skilling and you will win. And it is true. Traditionally, the teams that scale win more games. It's an easy way to play.
He's won a lot of. If people don't know, Reaper's regular split record is very impressive in LCS.
Yeah, it is very good.
On T9, he was getting them like top 4 every single time, no matter what.
Yeah,
pretty much.
I mean, Reaper is a very simple person, right? Like he sees things like that, and he's like, yeah, one Thieves, strength, Aphelios, Orianna, Ornn, free win, but playing Jace top and I don't know, something funny with like LeBlanc is not our strength, right? So he just picks them their strengths, and he wants them to play that kind of style. He wants them to play around their strengths, and that's how he coaches that team. And I think that's something that works for them. I can't blame One Thieves for playing their way, because they're winning games like that. They won LCS for the first time in their org's history by playing that way, by playing ceiling and playing defensive and waiting for their opponents, us, last summer, make mistakes. And we did. We got caught in late game, lost Elder, lost Baron, and they won.
Well, it puts the burden of execution on your opponent, right?
Yes.
And like that works in NA, but we've also seen how these strategies then go to Worlds and then get absolutely blown the fuck up by.
Do you remember that that one team played Sona against the Chinese team? Who was that AC that played Draven and they won the game in like 15 minutes? Like actually 15 minutes, the whole game was over. I think it was T1 against some Chinese team. IG? I don't remember, but that's a good example of like Sona or something might work in NA or whatever. T1 was IG, someone says in the chat. Yeah, it was IG. Jackie Love played Draven, I think. And they just ended the whole game in like 60 minutes. And I was like, yeah, this was NA, Sona, free win. So it's always a thing. Would you play this kind of scaling comp against the best team in the world? No, probably not. Well, it's against C9 or One Thieves, so it's fine.
It's the same thing with like the TSM 06 at Worlds. It's like win with Bjergsen Zillion, go to Worlds, get absolutely destroyed by Lucian mid, and win 0 games in groups.
Yeah, I mean, for example, it's hard because in NA, I remember that summer split, it was Niski's iteration, right? And we played Lucian against Zillion, and we were losing the game. We couldn't win mid hard enough. It was close. You almost got a solo kill, but not quite, and we lost the game. Then you go to Worlds, and you're losing lane to Set mid, right? A much weaker lane than Lucian. But I can't really blame Bjergsen for playing Zillion in NA when he wins. When he wins the games, he won Summer Split playing that way. So it's hard to blame him for doing it, right?
No.
He's fucking winning. But then you go to Worlds and you get reality checked. It feels really bad, especially for fans to watch it, right? So at what point do you play for Worlds instead of playing for LCS and winning LCS?
Yeah.
Because it should be the same thing.
Well, I think it's a really hard call to make, especially when there's so much pressure on teams to make the World Championship. Like, are we really going to expect Team Liquid to radically change their play style when they can catch throws from other teams? When Team Liquid not going to Worlds this year would be the biggest financial disaster in LCS history. So, when the stakes are so high, you're just not willing to take a lot of risks.
Yeah, watching the game right now, and yeah, he's down 30 CS to set. Without context, obviously, I didn't actually watch the whole game for why it's happening, but he's down a lot of CS. Whereas, see here, TSM versus 9 when 20 summer. See if we can find this game. He plays. Not this game. 2. Nope. 3 maybe. I think it was game 4 actually. I remember now. Yes, it's game 4, and he is down 4 CS to Niski's Lucian.
Yeah.
So how do you really blame someone like that?
Of course not.
It's hard to find that kind of balance. But what were you saying before? I was kind of like on my own mind trip down the wormhole.
The memory, walking down memory lane. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think it's hard because the burden of execution is so much higher. So when you have, whether it's explicitly stated by the team's coaches and management or not, the players know that what the expectation of that team is, and I think it's hard when you're Team Liquid or 100 Thieves and you're coming in. And 100 Thieves made finals back to back, right? Like they've shown that they can peak at the right time. They won the title. They got to the finals again. So do you really want to upset the balance and maybe fuck up getting to Worlds when you're pretty confident you can make it to Worlds just by doing what's worked in the past? And if nobody's good enough to execute on you, then why change anything? You accomplish your goal that your management sets out of getting to Worlds. You maybe don't do super well at Worlds because you're not built for that kind of competition, but it doesn't fucking matter in the end. Yeah. Doesn't matter.
I mean, it actually doesn't matter. Like, any teams would be completely okay with just making Worlds, I think, from my business point of view.
Yes.
Like, making Worlds in NA this year is huge. It doesn't matter if you win or not. Like, it's all good enough. But a team like Team Liquid, like, I even remember in spring split playoffs when they were struggling a little bit, there was a lot of rumors going around that if they didn't win the split, they'll make changes because their roster is built to win, not built to go second or third place and make Worlds as third seed and losing groups. Not the purpose of the comp. Their team, right? They're like a super team, quote unquote, right?
Oh, yeah.
Pick players from wherever they wanted. Got Bergson back, got people, stack team. Everyone wanted to be on Team Liquid. I was kind of sitting there oh, please, Team Liquid, take me, But yeah, I think that I was unsurprised nothing happened with TL. But I also respect them staying together through a hard split because I think making changes from spring to summer is always kind of sketchy. It's not always going to work out for you. It's too late to make changes, I think, a lot of the time. But I think that it's obvious if Liquid doesn't do well at Worlds or go to Worlds at all, it's going to be a huge, they're going to kick everyone or something. They're going to revamp the whole roster, right? So
it's definitely not going to be good for them.
The other problem they have as a squad, if you think about it, is the other issue with super teams is also why super teams often fail. Is because it's really hard to kick people. Like after one split, which player are you kicking? Because remember, they could just get really good in the next split. They might even go to a rival team and just beat your ass. You're going to look like a fool at that point. So if you buy a roster for the money they've bought, you're going to at least have it the whole year. You're just going to fucking run it and just see how it goes. And if it fails, it fails. Okay, that happened. Yeah. By the way, two things. One thing I would say is I checked it. It was actually, you were right. It was against IG where T1 had Teddy play the Sona Tarek bot lane.
Yeah.
It was MSI 2019, if people want to look it up. It's in the group stage, the first time they play, I think. And the other one is what you were saying earlier, though. That's actually the tough part, though, because I know, at least from esports history, even in games where NA wasn't the best region, so most big esports games, there actually is a way bigger financial incentive to win anything that's viewed as the NA championship, because then any domestic sponsor, you can say to them, we're the champions of the country. Yep. So even if in Counter-Strike, that didn't used to be a big deal, back in CS 1.6, Alex Garfield used to tell the Evil Geniuses players, look, you just win the NA qualifiers so I can back and say you're the best in NA, and that's all the sponsor cares about. Like that, essentially, if you had to weigh it up, look, as fans, we'd rather someone tries to make semis at Worlds than win LCS. But actually, business-wise, it's probably, if you had to choose, make round of 8 or just go out in groups and win LCS, it might financially be better to win LCS, as fucked up as that sounds. The only problem I have is I don't think that should apply. Maybe for TL, that has a logic. It shouldn't apply to 100 Thieves. One, you've already won LCS. It's not like it's some quest you've never completed. And two, you've already been to Worlds with this exact 5-man lineup. So who the fuck wants to go again and get grouped? You've got to go this time to do something in the playoffs. That's the only reason to keep the lineup together, aside from fucking some naive dream Pappy Smith has that it's going to be the fucking next dynasty or whatever. Spoiler, it isn't. But okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
We'll see if they make finals again, Thorin. Like,
I actually don't know if that's true. Like the whole winning NA is better than going to Worlds semifinals. It might be, because I don't know if sponsors like AT&T, for in our case, an American-only company, I think, would care if we go to semifinals in Korea.
They would.
I have no idea. I'm just speaking out of my ass here, right? So, but I wouldn't imagine they care a lot about it. But winning LCS, they probably like, we're on camera, getting a lot of pictures, and AT&T, let's go, boys, Like,
it might be in some stadium like MSG, like all the crowd.
Right?
Like, they love that shit. Yeah, they eat that up, of course.
Maybe things like Red Bull or BMW would like it if we won. I'm sure they wouldn't mind.
Here's what they really like, by the way, Thorin. They love to send some random ass executive to the event in NA, and that executive just shakes the player's hand, shakes Jack's hand. Then they're like, "Oh, look, we're in Madison Square Garden. All the people are cheering. Wow, look at our investment." And then they just take the plane home or take the subway home.
This boomer fucker into the crowd for one big hug. Like, oh, let's all get pizza together, yay! Like fucking some shit hockey.
That's really how it works. Which is why it's important that NA teams are going to really care about going to Worlds in NA. It's not because it's in NA. It's not because it's going to get the highest viewership. By the way, guys, Worlds in NA doesn't get the highest viewership because it's in a fucking terrible time zone for Asia and Europe, which are much bigger regions. Like, mostly it's a terrible time zone for Asia, which is the biggest viewership region. But it is absolutely incredible for NA sponsors to just show up, be put in a luxury box in, a stadium. They're going to go to San Francisco and be in the Oracle Arena in a luxury box, and Riot and the teams are going to be like, "Here's your caviar, sir." And they're going to be like, "Wow, look at our investment. There are 15,000 people cheering for the esports." And then they'll go home happy. And that's it. And that's what matters.
Do you think that there's a correlation between like Worlds mattering less for business perspectives, between like the fact that the salaries of players are so high that most teams probably are paid more in salaries than Worlds prize money?
Oh, they do, for sure. I think Björksen makes more in salary than you even win if the team for first place at Worlds.
I don't even know what is the salary. What is the World's prize money?
The World's like just over 2 million, and I think you get like a little bit gets added in from the skins or something. It's about 2 million. For like
the skins actually make a lot of money, from what I've heard.
They get like $1 million.
The word in the street is that the skins make a lot of money, even
yes,
these days, for the teams that have nice skins. Skins like IG Kaiser, I'm sure they make fat bank off that kind of stuff. But yeah, I'm sure that some teams pay more salary than World's prize money for first place, right? So
Sure.
I wonder if that has anything to do with it, but I don't know. I guess
I mean, the prize money
League was never really a prize money game.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
I wonder if it should be.
No. I think it's better to. I mean, it's better for the players not to have it be a prize money game.
It's a good thing.
No, it's the problem, Monty. There's pros and cons. Yeah, go give us your take. Why don't you like it, Sven?
I mean, I like that it's sustainable and it's not just the best team that makes a lot of money. But I also don't like that we have this league format only, where we have 2 tournaments a year and it's only 4 teams in total. 1 at MSI and 3 at Worlds. 4, I guess, if you're Korea or China. So you never get to see like the pisters play against each other, right? You never get to see the low tier teams play against each other. So
you never get to see like fucking Astralis play against TSM now and see like would it be weird?
It could be fun to have like an open qualifier once in a while where maybe fucking Immortals makes a miracle run and they make it to fucking MSI against some good teams, and you're like, oh, that would be fucking hype, right? But at the same time, if the league format is more stable and better for business, I get it. It's hard to say. I'm not a businessman. I know shit about it. So.
Here's the thing, Sven. They thought it would be better for business. The whole premise was if we play more games and teams have a guaranteed number of games, it's easier to sell sponsors because those sponsors are guaranteed like a certain number of games. Like you're not going to be eliminated immediately. And sponsors do weaponize that against you, where they're like, even if you're really good, they'll be like, well, I just don't know if you're going to make playoffs. And if playoffs are the majority of the games or whatever, then they can argue for low value. So there is some truth to that. The problem is that it sounds good until the fans get bored, and then then there's no viewership, or the viewership declines like it has with LCS. And then you're in a bind where you're guaranteeing a bunch of games, but those games have low viewership because of the format you created. So then it just spirals down, right? So the logic was that's how traditional sports work in America. So let's do that. But the reality was maybe it did in some ways stabilize things for teams in the first couple of years, but once the viewership cycle starts to go down, it becomes really hard to get it back up, and then it becomes even harder to sell sponsors. So I think it's kind of what we're seeing right now.
I'm generally not a fan, though, and here's the reason why. Just because I'm an extreme human being. I hate the idea that the majority of the money is already being paid out to the players before they even play the fucking game at Worlds. Like, they've already had the majority of the money in the ecosystem. So before we play the World Championship, let's make sure everyone's paid and taken care of. Now let's just have a fun tournament and see who's the best in the world. I want all the money to be on that bloody World Championship. I want the team that comes last place to not just be crying, to be fucking broke. I want you bankrupt on the street, you homeless piece of shit. Learn to play some League of Legends. I want Faker to say, fuck T1, I have $50 million now, mate. I won Worlds 3 times, I was in the finals, and I have my salary, you cocksucker. Meanwhile, instead, like, the people like Bjergsen just get paid like X million to be like, I'm just average as fuck now. Like, fuck that noise. Play for your money.
My bad. Sorry for breathing.
It's all right, don't worry. It's all right.
It's funny because
all I'm saying is don't ever come after Thorin's money. Listen, there's all funny games on League of Legends, but you come after a fucking guy from the Northeast's money, the fucking claws come out, Sven.
Because I remember back in the good old days, of 15, 16, the prize money for LCS was like 50k euros, I believe. And back then, that was not just like a breeze for pro players.
Money, right?
Like, I think in Origin, I got something about 6k euros a month, I think. Something like that, 6, 7k. So 50k it was 50k split, so 10k each, right? But still, it was more than a month of salary.
Yeah.
It was good money. But nowadays, I think it's still 50k for LCS and LEC.
I mean, but that's by design. Like, Riot wanted the players to actually have stable incomes. Like, this was very much intentional.
I mean, it's a good thing. It's just funny, but back then it actually mattered. You're like, oh, nice, that's a lot of money, 10k in my pocket, fuck yeah, right? And then nowadays it's like, yeah, this guy gets paid $1.5 million over there. I don't. Just want to say, like, if any orgs want to pay me $1 million, I'm here, right? I'm here for you. But
yeah. So before we go, any final thoughts about any of the LCS teams you want to get out there?
No, I think I've said what I had to say. I think the top 4 is gonna be interesting. Who goes to Worlds? If it's gonna be us, Liquid, or one of Thieves missing out on Worlds, or maybe 2 of us. But I think it's gonna be 3 of the top 4 guys. Right now, I think EG looks kind of locked almost already. It's a bit too early to say. I've been in teams where we were starting summers with 9-0 and then we lost, so you never know, right? But
don't know how the meta is going to shake out either.
You never know what happens. Like, one bad patch and it's over for you. So yeah, I think it's gonna be exciting to go to Worlds, or to fight to go to Worlds. See who goes to Worlds. Phrasing is hard, but I think that I'm really enjoying playing support. It's like refreshing. It's a fresh breath of air for me as a player to enjoy something new, and I'm learning a lot more about both myself and the role and the game in general. So I'm enjoying it a lot, and I'm looking forward to playing more.
Well, you certainly had a strong start. I mean, I think I expected you to have practiced a lot, but given your circumstances, I think for you having as good a performance as you had is very impressive already. So I'm looking forward to where it goes for the rest of the split. Thanks for coming on. We'll be back in a couple minutes, guys, with viewer questions for you without Sven. So we'll see you then.
Thank you for having me, guys. See you.
Good news. It's the viewer questions section. I'll again reiterate. Everyone's saying questions in Twitch chat. You are just screaming into the void as you deserve. These are viewers, but it's technically the questions from people who buy the grog coin, which good news though, it's technically, thanks to the world, on sale. So how did they get it?
Go to the Inside on Esports Discord, of course. Go to the Grog Coin Lounge. There'll be a pinned post there with how you get it. 25 Grog Coins. You can ask questions. It's all great. We got to go through these somewhat quickly. It is, in fact, an American holiday, so I have to do things with my family.
All right.
Let's see here. What's more likely to happen first? LEC moves out of Berlin or Berlin getting good internet? I know nothing about Berlin internet, but I have heard people referencing it as very bad. The real problem with LEC being in Germany is a lot of the German laws, like labor laws, I think, are quite restrictive. I'm a bit confused.
It's the reason why Russian players couldn't have visas for a long time. Apparently, they didn't earn enough money to activate the visa you needed to go and work there, believe it or not.
Yeah, so I don't think it's moving. I mean, I also think for similar reasons, it would probably be smart to move LCS out of Los Angeles. Like, there's a lot of California employment laws and like massive state taxes and everything like that. Like, it doesn't actually make sense to have LCS in Los Angeles, but Riot decided to buy the old G4 studio and right across the street from their main campus, and now they're just locked in it forever, I guess. But certainly not a good thing financially. You could definitely make an argument. I mean, obviously ESL like runs a lot of events out of Poland because it's like a lot cheaper. So I don't know. I don't think any of that's going to happen, if I'm honest with you. Don't think they're moving out of Berlin. Don't think they're moving out of LA. They made bad business decisions years ago that they're just going to die on that hill. So
I think it's mental as well, because they never should ever have gone to Germany in the first place. The most obvious place always, genuinely, that's why I live here, is the Netherlands. Because it not only has the best hub airport in Europe, Schiphol, that everyone comes through. Admittedly, right now it's a nightmare because of all those bloody delays, but obviously that's not normally the case. And then secondly, it's fucking centralized, isn't it? It's got the best place to have the internet in Europe as well, because you've got amazing internet and you're right centralized for all the scrims. So it has everything. It has everything you could want. So I think it's mental they're in Germany.
Not to mention that
the labor laws, they have all that stupid shit where,
I mean, the Berlin airport has been like a disaster for years. Like,
also, I don't give a fuck what anyone says. When I tune into LEC, it's like I'm like, what year is it? They're still in a sci-fi horror movie, and everyone's just going to not say anything and just go, this is normal, this is fine. Let's all stand 15 meters apart doing a massive interview. Nothing weird about this. It's still 2020, right? We all have to pretend like the Emperor's got no clothes. Lovely outfit you have there, Mr. LEC. This is mental. We're still on that level. And then people are still talking, by the way, when someone gets ill, like it's fucking radioactive or something like that. That's all because of Germany. That's nothing to do with the LEC staff. Like, they're another country. I'm sure they'd be perfectly reasonable. So Germany ain't the place, mate. It ain't the place. Not for these centuries, anyway. Maybe like 5 in the future or something. Maybe it'll be amazing. Who knows? When it's some new Prussian republic or something. I don't know.
Here's this question again. I'm not sure how many times I can answer this question, guys. This is the last time I answer this question, by the way. What are your thoughts on allowing the coach to be in live comms for competitive LoL? This has obviously been something that's happened, like, has been discussed for a long time. In the very early days of League of Legends, so for example, at the MLG Summer Arena, which was one of the very earliest events in LoL in 2012, they did actually allow coaches in comms. So Steve from Team Liquid was in Curse's comms during those games. I don't think it's necessary at all. I think that it removes agency from the players. It probably would increase the quality of gameplay, but I don't want some guy just to be mind controlling players in real time. You know, I think it's lame.
Yeah, unfortunately, it would make for some amazing League of Legends, but the obvious thing that would happen would be you would just have some high/perks type motherfucker who would just shot call the whole game, wouldn't he? And then at that point, it wouldn't really be about the players anymore, would it? Be about the super duper coach.
I think,
which is brilliant. Look, like, essentially, by the way, that is American football, but it's a very unique sport. That's not what League of Legends is, unfortunately.
But American football is more similar to CS, where the coaches call plays in between action.
You can't do that in CS:GO.
Oh, aren't they on the comms?
When you do a timeout in CS:GO.
Oh, yeah, but they have like, 3 tactical timeouts a game?
Yeah, but the difference is in American football, you have the play clock. You can every time you can give that guy the play, you know.
Yeah. But, and there's no way to do timeouts in LoL. Like, you can't, it's a real-time game, right? That would just be crazy. So, I think for the most part, I just don't see it being super useful. By
the way, as an aside, that's even the reason why I think it's so egregious to having all these pause bugs, Monty. Because League is a game where you cannot allow someone to pause and then start that same game and resume it. The second you pause it, that's like giving me a free VOD review. I know we can't talk technically, but if you're a player who has a brain, you're sat there looking at the map the whole time thinking, and they're competent. Like, you shouldn't, that's information you would never have in that match.
Right.
So it actually ruins every match.
you relay that information as soon as the pause stops. Is obviously
of course, yes, exactly.
Would that have made CLG more competitive in season 4?
Of course it would.
Good joke.
Then he would just tell them,
I would like
to just press R. There you go. There's the joke.
I'd like to believe that's true. Whether it would be or not is a different story. I had some difficult players who may not have listened to what I told them in the game. Would significantly raising the minimum salary in NA and or EU create a more competitive league? No, it would not do that. The minimum salary, first off, let's be clear, guys. In NA, nobody gets paid the minimum salary. Okay? Nobody. All the players are paid very well.
And isn't the minimum 6 figures a year? It's $100,000 plus, right?
I think technically the minimum is like 60K, but nobody actually gets paid that in NA. Maybe some teams in the EU get paid that, but really that doesn't happen. It's like 60 or 70K, I think, in NA. By the way, that includes all of your housing costs, or like most like teams pay for your housing costs, they pay for your food, so it's basically just like 70K in discretionary income, which is pretty insane, by the way, when you live in fucking Los Angeles, right? So it's a good deal for the players. So no, it doesn't do anything. Paying the NA players more has not solved any problems. Like, we've seen NA player salaries, like, go from 60K to 200K to 1.5 million, and it hasn't improved the region.
Here's the problem, and you're not going to like it, but I give a fuck. If you actually think that paying them more money would make them more motivated and want to win more, you're just giving away that you're broke. I'm sorry, that's just true. If you've lived life and you've ever had any amount of disposable income or more salary, you'll realize it's not a motivator at all.
But by the way, they've actually done studies, like sociological studies on this, where there is a certain point that income just doesn't make you happier. Like, if all your needs are met and you have discretionary income to like go on, nice holidays and have, pursue your hobbies, like, there isn't a really big correlation they found between like upper middle class people and multimillionaires.
Basically, if you notice, plebs don't get the premise of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like, the bottom fucking layer is like shelter, food. Like, the point is, you don't get that and go, I'm complete now. That's just the basics to not be stressed about life. Doesn't make you happy to just have food. What makes you happy is like the company you have when you have food, what you're doing, how was it cooked? Did someone cook it for? Like, there's a million factors that have fuck all to do with the money. So money is, it's a distraction, guys. It's there's no correlation between money and happiness. Come on. Except you cannot have no money and probably be really happy.
Also, you could potentially make the argument that if NA players were paid $300K, and we saw Korean and Chinese players getting paid $2 million, that NA players might actually be happier because they wouldn't have the expectation of performing well in comparison to these other regions.
I love that you are American, so even you get sucked in. Let me just clarify. I'm not American, so I don't give a fuck. And not only that, that is what NA players would say. But that is NA going, you know what? Sucks getting paid millions of dollars. Why is that? Because then I'm expected to be really good at the game. Oh, fuck. And it must be hard living up to that expectation. Oh, I don't live up to it. Just don't like being judged for making millions and being shit. Like, I sometimes want to pinch myself. Like, are Americans real? Are y'all in the simulation? Is America real place? Is that actually just the internet? I upload there when I go to the airport. What are we doing here? Come on then. Next question.
What is the worst book you finished? It has to be one that I would have been forced to read in college.
I mean, in light of what you said last episode, I have to say I'm very good. I just quit books if they're shit, mate.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't make myself read a fucking. It has to be good, mate. If some shit, I'll tell you what mine is, but the problem is this one actually, I'm almost certain I'm semi-wrong about, and it was just the folly of youth. I tried reading War and Peace, but way too young. I think I was like 16 or something when I tried reading it though. And I just quit after about 100 pages, mate. It wasn't interesting to me. But that was the problem there is like, I was 16 years old, wasn't I? Like, it's not really the book to read then. I imagine if I read it as an adult now, it would probably be good.
Here's a book that I had to read. It's a book called Ishmael.
I guess I didn't finish that. Whatever. I can't remember what I finished. That was shit then. Come on then. You mean the one about like it's like a spiritual book, right?
About a gorilla?
Just the one I'm on about, where it's all like spiritual lessons and shit.
Yeah, it was really
It was by some like hippie woman, right?
Guy, yeah. Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah, there we go. It was a book by Daniel Quinn called Ishmael. It's a philosophical novel, right?
That one's real bad. But it was definitely like some book. I mean, I read some really horrible books in college too. Some of which I had to read because they were horrible. Like, look, there is a period because it's basically like when you're a literature major, right? You have to take like courses about the history of literature, and sometimes there were periods where English literature was just fucking terrible. And so, for example, like the Gothic period, there's some fucking horrible books during that period that are just like really bad. Just like terrible pulp fiction, like garbage horror novels. But you read them to understand the history, not because they're good. So some of those were really bad too. What is the most inappropriate joke you've said on broadcast? I actually don't know. I have no idea.
I mean, that's obviously a catch-22, you idiot, because if I say it, then it's over in it. So
yeah,
over that, wouldn't it?
Like honestly, guys, we probably wouldn't repeat some of those because they were a product of their era.
Man's good because here's the thing: you can always get away with man. It's what's great is this is actually a perfect Thorin joke because it's mega edgy, but he can't get in trouble for it because it just skirts the line. The best joke I've ever said on broadcast was at the MLG Columbus 2016 Major, where they had this weird premise that they thought it'd be hilarious, Monty, if like the analyst desk were the casters instead. Sounds like a fun idea. Shit idea, by the way, because then we have to just cast the game and we're not casters. So the casters for the All-Star game was Red Eye, me, and Richard Lewis. And in this fucking All-Star game, I had a joke where the new version of Nuke had just been released. And famously, Nuke in CS history is the more CT-sided map. You always win like 12, 13 rounds. And it's just like who wins 12 or 13 rounds wins the map historically, right? So because this version, they tried to even it up a bit, Red Eye goes, it's a lot more T-sided, this one. And I go, the whole world is, Paul. Straight fire. You tell me that it's straight fire. That's fucking... That's 2016 as well, baby. That's like Syria era. Oh, that was fucking...
I don't think that's not very inappropriate.
No, here's the problem. It's not... You wouldn't actually get banned, but it's inappropriate in the sense that, like, you probably shouldn't on a video game major broadcast reference, like, real-life terrorism or, you know, like, in that regard, it's inappropriate. As I say, if it was really inappropriate, we can't say it now, can we, on Twitch? So
I mean,
he's got that one. Don't worry, Monty. They come into my fucking server. They pretend they're naive and they do the same thing. They're like, but what did that guy say? Who got banned, though? No, but guys, I don't know what word he said, though. Can someone say the word? I'm like, we're not saying, like, the N-word, you idiot. Like, no one's going to get tricked by that. We're not that dumb. Like, you aren't going to trap us into that. Like, it's obvious. We can see you a mile away.
I will say that I know of some jokes, not my jokes, or jokes that I've been on the broadcast of, but let's just say, like, in the early days of StarCraft and English broadcasting, there were some really fucking funny jokes that were very inappropriate that would go over very badly now, like really badly. But they're still funny, and they were funny at the time. But what you could get away with in, like, 2007, 2009, 2010, to a very, you were saying them to a very like gamer hardcore audience, and they were real funny. But yeah, you definitely all I gotta say is like, go back and watch some of the old In Control content. Like he said some outrageous shit that was really funny.
Too good.
Or too good, obviously, also hilarious. Monty, you teased me on the last episode. I'm curious, can you actually get into early development of League of Legends and its engine/code? I don't want to burn sources is really the problem with this one. I do know quite a bit, but it may, because there were so few employees there at the time, it may in fact accidentally reveal my sources. But it was
it basically was scuffed from day one, it seems like. They didn't start with the Put it this way, in the modern day, you go and buy the best Unreal Engine that has all the... They didn't do that. They didn't do that part. But spoiler.
Some of their engineers, I will say at the time, had engines of their own that Riot tried to like convince to give them to them for free, and they didn't. And then those engines were then used for later games once they left. Like I told you, like I've said before, but like, the engine itself was the technical direct. I mean, you can just look this up. The technical director of Riot was the guy who made the engine for that horrible Big Rigs game. So you put the puzzle pieces together on that one. Are there any actual rumors of LoL 2? No, I don't think they'll ever do that.
I don't think that ever. No.
The amount it would take to recode this entire game I would be really impressed if Riot did it. Don't get me wrong, but I think the cost on that is crazy.
Just think how hilarious it is. You're going to literally get 2 different versions of CSGO in the history of League of Legends. CSGO only came out in 2012. CSGO 2 is constantly rumored and they're supposed to update and stuff. So like, Riot's just never going to do it, mate. They just decided on that one. I don't blame them though. They still have the #1 game with all this fucking wonky tech, so I can see why they think it works.
Yeah, I also think it's a lot more difficult because the League engine is just so scuffed that rebuilding
how many more billions do you need? Eventually, this is like eventually there has to be some fucking number you can hit where it can be doable. Right. Come on. They're making it sound like you're asking them to go to the moon.
Maybe they'll build it off maybe they'll build it off the Wild Rift tech or something, but it does seem at least credible. I mean, a lot of the CSGO rumors that are coming out right now seem pretty credible as to when this will happen. Like the timeline is lining up too. It's like the 10th anniversary is in August for CSGO. Valve also, as many of you know, will just they don't say anything and then they just drop it on you. So, but the rumors seem pretty legit right now on the CSGO front. That's also, by the way, hilariously, guys, Riot is mega hustling behind the scenes to get these Valorant partnerships done because I think they think that the new version of CSGO is going to drop, and they know as soon as that happens, their boy Tarek is going to take all his viewers and go play CSGO, and their boy Shrouds are going to go.
Streamers are going to go ham, of course.
Streamers are going to go ham, and guess what? When you build your esport on the sand of co-streaming, and those people just fuck off to go play CS again, you're in big trouble. Big trouble. How many Locodocos would it take to beat Prime Mike Tyson in a boxing match? That's actually
the
very
joke.
Funny mental
The reason that's actually funny is because we tried explaining the abstract principle that, like, in theory, you know. But the joke is, I actually feel like even infinite locals, they just don't have the spirit in them. You know what I mean? That might be the one where you could throw any amount. I don't think they would win.
Would they even? I don't even think they would punch Mike Tyson. I think they would just. I think like they would. It would be like an infinite number of Locodocos in a circle at a 10-foot distance, and Mike Tyson would walk, and then the circle, like the bubble, would just move with Mike Tyson.
Also, you have to realize if Mike Tyson even like glanced them with a punch, Local's really sensitive. He'd just get really emotionally upset and be like, why do I have to fight him? And I'd have to come in like, oh, come on, let Mike leave him. He's a mate of mine. Come on.
And then when you asked Locodoco about Mike Tyson punching him, he would tell you Mike Tyson is actually secretly a really good guy.
You have to realize my relationship with Loco basically is like the end of that movie, Midnight Cowboy. I'm just the guy sort of propping him up when he might be about to die at the end of the bus. Like, it's all right, Loco, we'll make it, son. Fucking hold in there, son. Whatever. Classic reference if anyone knows that movie from the 70s.
That was actually a good riff on last week's question. Good job. Architect of Korean esports based Joe. Also great name. I lost my taste for instant ramen / noodles, so thank you for that. What makes a character or theme of a story shallow or deep? Can you use Hamlet in One Piece or Marvel movies? Sure, I can use Hamlet and Marvel movies. You haven't read Berserk the manga, have you, Thorin, the manga? Oh. Okay, that was the next question. So the thing about Hamlet is Hamlet presents existential philosophical questions about a ton of different topics, like the nature of identity, existential questions about the nobility of suicide, like extremely beautifully. And these are like timeless questions, right? And the thing about Marvel movies is that it's just a bunch of idiots in capes, not actually making you think about philosophy very much. They do at a kind of basic level where you're like, is Iron Man an arrogant asshole, and does he deserve this level of power? But it's not the same as some of the famous monologues from Hamlet that dive really deeply into the human condition, right?
I wouldn't even say they explore it though, Monty. They propose the premise, maybe being rich and the superhero is not good. And then how does he solve it? Well, if he beats someone's face in well enough, then he was right. Like, brilliant. Oh, great philosophy there. Fucking hell. Like, what? So the joke of Marvel movies is they just like hint at philosophy without really there's no character development in those movies. I don't care if someone's going to the Incredible Hulk that they didn't. There's no character development in those movies. They are by definition the most surface level movies ever. Yeah. I mean, they have to be. Remember, they make movies where you might not have watched the other 10 movies, but you have to be able to enjoy this one now. So by definition, it can't be super deep, can it?
Yeah, and also, I mean, the poetry of Shakespeare is unrivaled. I mean, you're also talking to me, and I think Shakespeare is probably the greatest artist in human history. So I'm kind of biased in this regard. I think
obviously, how can one man like me compete against an amalgam of people, including fucking Bacon, all those people in his so-called British intelligence at the time? Well, just one man. Of course, the fucking committee's going to be better.
Yeah.
Based, looking at it. Based.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of interesting theories.
There's a lot of actually plausible theories, yeah. It's just too good. Basically, the joke is it's too
fucking good.
And there's too much. It's too prolific. Like, I don't think people know. There's the problem, Monty. They think Shakespeare is just like Hamlet, Romeo. Do you know how many fucking poems alone this motherfucker wrote? Like, he either was, like Monty said, just like the god of art, or it was something like I'm saying, like it was literally like a fucking campaign to like have a whole team of people make shit. It's the same thing people say basically with the Beatles, if you don't know. The Beatles wrote too much music, mate. They would just go in and in 2 weeks they'd have like the whole album. That's supposed to be impossible if you don't know. Like they just don't do that and have it'll be like amazing or whatever. So yeah, I think it's plausible.
That's why it's fun to look at various theories of Shakespeare. That's why people, in other works of fiction.
Marlowe was the other one, of course,
like,
as well.
Yeah, Christopher Marlowe faked his own death, or
yes.
I don't think that happened. The writing styles are just too different, but whatever. Faust is not as good as some of Shakespeare's plays suck. Like Titus Andronicus fucking sucks. But anyway, like if you actually look at it, like some people are like, oh, he made a deal with the devil. Like that's been one. Hilariously, if you watch Only Lovers Left Alive, which is a Jim Jarmusch movie, which you should watch, it's a vampire movie, and basically the theory in that Christopher Marlowe is a vampire character in that. And he was a vampire, so he's lived for thousands of years, and then he basically faked his own death as Marlowe to then become Shakespeare, so that he had, they have to fake their deaths occasionally, right? Because otherwise, how do they live? How do you justify living forever? And so basically, it was like, these beings that have existed for thousands of years are great artists because of the length of time that they've had to practice. So anyway, fun stuff.
By the way, even if you don't like the play, there is a movie of Titus, though, that had Anthony Hopkins in from the 90s. Yep. That's worth watching. That is a good movie.
I always go see Titus because it's fucking fun to watch, because it's very bloody, but it is bad. Especially compared to many of other Shakespeare's plays. Nelson said Scrimming T1 taught them in Excel how to close games quicker when playing bad games, and that only through directly playing against them would they be able to learn such a lesson.
Why is he phrased that like that prequel thing, like only through me shall you acquire a power greater than any Jedi?
What do you think is the reason teams are unable to learn these lessons? Like because here's the thing: they expose your mistakes that aren't punished it's hard to know that what you're doing is wrong if it's working and a team is not punishing you for it, right? I think that's
the analogy, right? The analogy is this. Imagine you were in a scenario where you're training against someone in a combat sport, but they're in like 2 weight classes smaller than you. Well, now all of a sudden you might try techniques that aren't even well executed. You just have a weight advantage, or you're holding that guy down, or using brute force, or something like that. Like in that scenario, you don't really know if your technique is good. And when you fight someone at your weight class, you might just get tooled because you might be shit. You might have just been winning because of the advantage. Basically, I'll very briefly explain a scenario I've said in the past, but this is a principle I genuinely think teams don't understand because it's never been done by anyone else. The reason why the Brazilian team in CSGO, Luminosity, becoming #1 is the most incredible story, one of the most incredible stories in Counter-Strike history. It's because they did it while living in the NA region when the other NA teams were like the 9th best team in the world. They weren't even close to the Europeans. So how did Luminosity practice like the 10th best team and become the #1 team in the world? Well, they even said themselves they would intentionally look for what Monty's talking about. Moments where they're not properly punishing us here. They're not properly like defending something. I could just myself kill these 2 people and do a random play, because they knew that's not basically practicing for the matches. Like what Sven said, that's not a draft that works against T1. That's not a play that's going to work against Fnatic at the time. So what they would do is they would make themselves do the correct play, whether it was like the most efficient practice or not. And in doing so, it then did work when they went against the real teams. The shadow boxing sort of approach did work. So I think in general, that's like a mad misunderstood concept. Like I think that's something that people need to do, is you've got to sort of like go for excellence, as it were.
Yeah, I think the problem is really that esports really just has a shitty practice infrastructure.
Oh, it does. It's terrible. Because the real problem is this, Monty. At the base of it is a game, and we all started it for fun. That's the problem. You know what I mean? Remember, if you're like an American football player, that stopped being fun when you were like 12, when you're on the school team and you have all the pressure and you're getting coached. Like, you're not 20 going, lol, I might just run it down in this game. That's not like that in American football games. So the problem we all have is 1 minute before you become pro, you're having a laugh, just flaming people and playing solo queue, aren't you? So it's unfortunately when it becomes serious, it doesn't quite become serious enough for me. I want people to make it like it's, dude. I know we're going to get them now, but I always wanted to have, like, you know, in basketball and the sports like lifers. People are just in the sport their whole life. They're a player, then they're a coach, then they're an old guy. I think that's sick. That's when games get really amazing, when people can put their whole life into it.
Agreed. Is there a history of performance-enhancing drug use in esports? Yes.
Not in League of Legends, I'll say. It's mainly just like American FPS games, it feels like.
Yeah, Adderall, obviously. Yes. It's mostly Adderall, guys. But
I will see it. There was one in Korea, but this wasn't that bad. Theirs was more like herbal shit, but they had some herbal shit, famously like Flash and stuff used to take that, like Nanawar told me, did like sort of calm you down a bit, but it was just some herbal remedy or whatever. It does sound basic when he said like, ooh, herbal remedy, like some fucking secret shit, but I think it was just something basic, mate.
As far as I know, most of the Adderall is also in like console esports. It's really hard as somebody who has taken Adderall, who does not have an Adderall prescription to do things like write college papers. It does focus you very heavily, but it also kind of shuts out the world in a way. I think it would be very hard to compete strategically in a team esport or any team sport while taking Adderall, because you kind of just zone out a little bit. So I think that would be challenging. So I don't think it's been really common in League, for example. What was the worst or biggest misnarrative that the Riot desks domestically or at Worlds did that either missed the boat or were done without the esports eye you two have?
I think I've already made mine. Like, assuming we're going recently, I think it is one of the stupidest shoot yourself in the foot moments ever. That you could have a tournament, Monty, in which two of the top teams on opposite sides of the bracket are Faker and his literal protege who went to the other region, and you don't even make that storyline, even when they're in the fucking semi-final. You just don't want... At that point in time, that's the definition of looking a gift horse in the mouth. Like, you just don't want to win narratively, mate. You just don't care about this.
It's really hard because I think in my experience, there have been a lot of Korean narratives that have been missed out on because they don't, like, the producers just don't know the narratives because they don't watch all the games. And I'm sure it's even more true of China.
An example of something you're thinking of?
Look, I mean, I've heard a million weird shit like this player doesn't play this champion during the broadcast, and I'm sitting on the desk and I'm like, they definitely do, and they have, and they are quite good at it. And so it's like a million things like that because Riot insists on having casters who are not from regions with these teams cast those matches. And I in my experience, there are many mistakes that are made. Ideally, you'd have a caster. You'd have a TriCast, you'd have a play-by-play caster, and then you'd have an analyst from each of the team's regions who could knowledgeably talk about them. But because Riot would rather play stupid political power games with casters on their broadcast rather than giving you a good product, you don't get that.
I've also said my other favourite joke, because this was a classic one from LEC. When EULCS began, for the first 2 years, they never shut the fuck up banging on about how Fnatic were the Season 1 champs, even though the Fnatic that began the EULCS had 2 players that won the Season 1 championship and 2 players that lost the Season 1 championship in the same match. So how the fuck does any narrative then work of, like, they know what it takes to win? Oh, except for the other half who don't. Like, what are you even talking about now? Like, you've ruined that whole narrative, you idiot.
Okay, what are your top 3 favorite cuisines and a must-have dish from each? Okay, mine are probably Thai, Mexican.
Maybe like barbecue, American barbecue or something?
I don't know, American barbecue. Korean food's probably up there. Japanese food's also pretty close. Probably I like Japanese, maybe. No, I'll do Korean. So I'll do Thai, Mexican, Korean. Thai, pad krapao, which is a street food dish with ground pork and Thai basil. And it's very spicy. Fry an egg in the wok on top. Very simple. You can get it in Bangkok, like any street corner. It's fucking so good. I make it myself. I used to cook in a Thai restaurant when I was in college. So Mexican food. Fucking love Oaxacan food in particular. Mole, black mole, especially on like enchiladas. Love that. And what else? What did I say? Korean food? I mean, how can you go wrong with fucking samgyeopsal, which is Korean pork belly? Just so good.
Let me think, what would I go for? So obviously I'll do Korean, but I'm going to say I'm not going samgyeopsal. I'll go... basically, actually, pork is my favourite. So galbi or bulgogi pork is the best in my opinion. It goes the best with the spicy marinade. That's one of the best. As I said on past episodes, if you get that, try and get one of those ones where it has the grate over the top, not the plate, the hot plate. The grate one is the best for cooking the galbi, which makes it really good. That's one. There's Korean. What should I do? I'll do Thai as well. I'm actually a big fan of Thai food. I prefer the ones that are like... I like the red, spicier curries. So I like the duck one of that, for example.
Yeah, Penang.
Like, what would you call? Yeah, or like a
Penang curry or red curry,
whatever they call it. Yeah,
that
those
one's
are pretty good
for sure.
I like those ones. Because if people don't know, what I like about Thai food is it's a curry, so it has spice, but they always pair it with some sort of a fruit that sort of like balances the flavor, you notice. So pineapple or something. They do a really good job balancing out the Thai food. And also Thai food, by the way, mega consistent around the world, I've noticed. Yep. You can get very similar quality. It's not like the Korean food, for example, that's like super up and down around the world. And then the last one, just to fucking meme on y'all, I'll obviously say British cuisine, won't I? And
I know, you love the roast, Dad.
Dude, prime rib is roast lamb. Classic roast lamb with mint sauce, Yorkshire puddings, roast potatoes, gravy, a little bit of carrots cooked in butter, and then some broccoli that I'm not going to eat, but it's there to look good on the plate, isn't it? Or whatever. I'm one of those kids I still don't eat to this day, mate, if I don't want to.
Yeah, I mean, I like American barbecue too. It's also a good one. But I mean, I like so many different kinds of food. I love Moroccan food as well. Like, so if I had to pick Moroccan food, I fucking love lamb tagines with apricot, because what Moroccan does so well is it balances like cumin with dried fruit and nuts inside with the lamb. Fucking so good. I have a tagine. I cook Moroccan food myself. It's great. Do you remember being humbled by someone who you didn't know was more experienced than you?
You got to give a context. In what context? What does that mean?
I mean, I think like you assume you have more experience than them. I mean, I'm sure it's happened to me. I generally don't.
Oh, right. You mean it's like in life in general, not in esports.
I don't usually approach people. Okay. I don't usually approach people in that fashion. So I don't often assume that I know some more than people I've just met who, either I know their reputation or I'm not going to assume that I necessarily.
I'll give you my angle. I'll say I definitely did this loads when I was young, because I actually think one of the most destructive things that people did in the Western culture was parents and teachers and culture tell children constantly, your parents know nothing, they're just idiots from the last generation who have outdated values, and you should just update your values to all the things in school and what everyone's telling you in public. Because what that leads to is you think stupid things, which, by the way, if you're a young person, listen to this and you go, but that's right, isn't it? You're an idiot, right? If you think because you went to like uni or you're like good at maths or at science, if you think that means you know more than your like dad or granddad who might just work like a blue collar, you're out your fucking mind. They have decades of life experience. And it doesn't matter, by the way, that you could pass a maths exam. What does that help you in life, mate? That's a very, very niche skill set to have. The skill sets you can have from just being alive and being a human being. That's one thing I think as a young person, because you've never been there, you can't know what you don't know. You can't know how much you're lacking, basically. And you think to yourself, but I'm an adult. You're not at all. You're a fucking pleb. You're a beginner.
Well, it's also, I think, in my life, even when I was a teenager, some of my friends, like my closest friends, were high school dropouts who are self-educated and self-taught and, make fuck tons of money now because they taught themselves really valuable, like, network engineering skills or these other things. So I know a lot of self-educated people, even though I took a much more traditional educational approach and, went to an elite American liberal arts college and all of this stuff. But I would say many of my friends don't have the same educational background and had just taught themselves. I mean, you're among them, Thorin, right? And I was kind of disappointed, honestly, by my peers at college because they weren't any smarter than other people that I had known, right? So I guess I never really go into it with an expectation of somebody's background makes them better or worse. It's kind of just your own individual motivation. So I actually don't really have that experience because I don't approach life in that way, I guess would be my answer.
Last question.
Yep. Guys, I'm sorry.
We'll roll the other ones over the next one.
Yeah. I just have to go. So this is
3-4 hours. Don't worry about it.
Yep. If you had to assign percents totaling 100, how would you attribute the following elements to the general failure of the West on an international stage in League of Legends? Players, coaches, orgs, or infrastructure? Things that are Riot's fault, such as region locking, format, server location.
How many fucking factors is this? You can't have 10 factors.
No, it's four. It's four.
So players,
coaches, orgs, or infrastructure. So
those are all together.
Those are things that are Riot's fault. Region locking, formats. So honestly, this is an interesting question. I actually think, having seen Overwatch League, that region locking is actually a huge part as to why Western teams are not good.
And is that counted infrastructure?
Yeah, that's counted infrastructure.
Right, okay.
Because they segmented the leagues. When Overwatch League, the Korean teams were really good in Overwatch because there was a high concentration of talent in Korea. But once Overwatch League started and all those Korean players came to NA and they were in one pool of players, we actually saw a lot of Western players improve, be able to even win Overwatch League titles on mixed rosters. And so I do tend to think that by siloing the regions, it really affects Western play. I think if Western players were in constant practice environments with LCK and LPL teams, that they would be competitive with those teams. So 50% to infrastructure, I would say.
Oh, I've done something similar. Shall I tell you what I did? I've just done my split here. I'm going 60% infrastructure because you included region locking, right? Here's the joke. If you hadn't have told me that, by the way, I would actually say infrastructure is better in NA in some regards. Like, some Korean teams don't have that great setup of the coaching staff and all the facilities. It's just quite similar to top NA teams. But if you were doing region locking, that's a massive one. I've always told people, the reason in CSGO you can get enormous upsets you cannot get in League of Legends is familiarity. Is that, like, yes, it's an upset, but I've played you before. We're all at the same tournaments. Like, it just, you're not as scary anymore. You're just a team that's better than me. I've played you in the past, so I've got familiarity. I might even have some ways of beating you in that sense.
There's no mystique.
Good practice. Yeah, exactly. So to me, there's not the same fear of the unknown of like, oh my God, I'm playing the Korean champions. Like, you played them at the last bloody IEM event. Like, if they're better than you, they're better than you. Now just get down to trying to beat them. Half the battle in League of Legends is you can't get past the mystique. The aura around those Koreans pre-season 8 was ridiculous, wasn't it? Like, people lost against Faker before they even hit the first minion. It was ridiculous. So I would put infrastructure massive. I think that is the majority of it. As I say, I've always thought you'd have had, like, the best players, the capses of the world. That's what you've really been robbed of, by the way, fans.
Yes.
Do you know how amazing their careers would have been if they were playing the top Asian teams every month? It would be fucking unbelievable.
And if they were in a practice environment.
It'd be so good, wouldn't it?
Yeah, with better solo queue and everything like that, too. I mean, NA players are bad because the NA server doesn't have players on it, right? Like, if it had 3 times as many players, the NA players would be much better because the competition level.
Are you ready? You're going to like this breakdown. I've gone 60% infrastructure.
Yep.
I'm going to put 30 for players because let's be real, there's not enough good players, as you say.
Sure.
And then just give 5 each to coaches and org because I think coaches and org are not at all the factor in any way. One, the coaches in Korea and Asia aren't that elite. They just have that insane cultural advantage where people listen to you by default because you're older. Like, we don't have that hack. And then in terms of the org, what fucking org problem is holding anyone back? Like,
yeah,
you
exactly.
Fucking type assassins won worlds. Like, their org is like fucking that org wouldn't even be in academy right now. What are you talking about? Like, there's nobody.
I mean, Rockstigers was, challenging for titles in Korea, and they had $3, so
exactly.
Yes. And also, honestly, the orgs really do try, in my experience, to provide infrastructure for the players. So I don't think it's really the orgs or the coaches' fault necessarily.
Here's the thing, though. I would actually include another factor that he didn't, and I would have put a lot into this. I would have put attitude/mentality. I would have put like a solid amount in that. That's the area I have my biggest concerns, because that's the area we could start fixing tomorrow, hopefully.
Yep. All right, guys. Sorry we didn't get to all your questions. It's just like we had to run the show later, and it's also later on a holiday, and I got shit to do with my family. So we will not have a show next week, by the way, because their LCS and LEC are on break. So if you guys want to follow LCK, Wolf and I will still do our show on this channel. So you can follow the big T1 Gen.G match that way if you so choose. So yeah, that's it. We will have another show in 2 weeks' time once the LCS and LEC return. Otherwise, enjoy some LPL and LCK games, and there'll be other content for that. Thanks a lot.